audience?
Yeah, I stream it to my. I always stream book club. I used to stream it on my channel, and now I just stream it on the second channel because that way people don't get a bunch of notifications for just book club. Like if people want to be
Right.
involved in just book club, they can do that. Um,
Uh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that it was a streamed event. I'm gonna have to opt out. Sorry,
oh
but
no,
okay.
you're good.
Enjoy book club.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Is everyone okay with it being streamed? Okay. Cool. Yeah, I know some people aren't, which is totally understandable. And if enough people aren't interested, we don't have to always stream it, but I just want to like share what we learned with people because I think it's always a pretty incredible thing. Okay, well, thanks for everyone's patience. And yeah, let's get started. So, for this book club, since we're going over the entire book, I do have notes that I can pull up, but I think in general, like it's going to be a lot more casual because we're going over the entire book. So, for me, like I have some chapters in mind that I really want to talk about. And yeah, I thought I would maybe just like open the floor and just kind of ask people like, what were some of their most favorite essays and what stuck out to them the most. Oh, sorry, really fast. Hey, Clark, your mic is making like a really intense. Okay, you got it. Okay, so yeah, what were some of your guys' favorite chapters or like favorite things that really stuck out to you while reading this?
Oh my gosh, that's such a big question. But for me, I'll just pick one thing. The chapter where they're talking about the Pledge of Allegiance, and
Mm-hmm.
when um, the um, their kid was like, I'm not doing it anymore, and just sat in I believe it was her seat, her pronouns being she, her. If anyone knows, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Um, and then a couple of the other kids followed, and the message that they had or the message that the teacher sent to the parents was like that, like, hey, I just want you to be aware that this is what's going on. And as a teacher, when I was in I do online classes now, so I don't have to deal with that. But when I was in person at school, I was just like, I totally don't want to adhere to the Pledge of Allegiance in any way, and I wish that I had some sort of a framework for rejecting it, and like, that stuck out to me as like, wow, I would just share this with people, and they would understand where the whole not standing for the pledge comes from.
Yeah, I never stood for the pledge. Or I did, and then I was just like, I just was like, I can't believe we do this every day. Like, it is so unnecessary. Like, listen, we know by now, okay? Like, we don't have to keep on doing this. But yeah, I would not stand for the pledge. And it wasn't even that, like, philosophically cool. I was just like, I just don't want to do this every day, and this is ridiculous. But yeah, I thought that was really funny how her teacher was like, "Hey, just so you know, like your daughter isn't studying for the Pledge of Allegiance." And it's like, "Okay, that's fine. That's fine." But yeah, I really love the way that she talked about that because like she kind of like she throws shade very subtly. Like she's not just like, "Yeah, fuck you," you know? She's like I feel like I'm a lot more aggressive, but I love how she's like, okay, so like y'all have your little Pledge of Allegiance, that's cute, and then she talks about um the the Thanksgiving address that the Hodi, oh my gosh, I'm totally Haudenosaunee have, and um that was like so profound. I was like, wow, like yeah, we should definitely like start unpacking that. Like the Thanksgiving address where like uh let me pull it up. It's like what's it called? What chapter is this called? Allegiance to Gratitude. Uh oh, so at the end, I'm just going to read like the first line. Today we have gathered, and when we look upon the faces around us, we see that the cycles that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now let us bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are at one. And I thought that was like when I first read the paragraph, I was like, oh, that's it. That's really great. But then it just keeps on going. It's like it talks about all these other animals and creatures and other living beings and just it makes sure to express thanks to everyone. And then it always ends, now our minds are at one. And then the fact that Hodino Shoni, like, they will come to an agreement when everyone agrees. And they do that by giving thanks first to everything. That way they can remember that they all have the same goals. And I'm just like, damn. Now, if I had to say that every day, even though it'd be a mouthful, I would be down. Like, that seems really healthy to me. But yeah, I love this chapter so much. Yeah, anyone else have like any thoughts on that?
I also never stood for the Pledge of Allegiance for various reasons, but I like the Thanksgiving address as well. A lot of my thoughts on the book are just, wow, people are being respectful to other living creatures. I do not see that very often. I very much so like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to dovetail off of Cornelius, I wanted to add that like throughout the whole book, there's sort of this normalizing of animism, of like seeing living creatures as living, you know, and this is no exception of that. Like recognizing the animals, the trees, the foods, the plants, the fish, like incredibly powerful, incredibly moving, and incredibly positioned like ideologically differently than like a pledge to a settler state.
Yeah. I just want to read the very last phrase. It says, "We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it is not our international or intention. Oh shoot! I think it is not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. And now our minds are one." Um, yeah, I just thought that was so beautiful.
And I did want to add too that like all the things that they're thankful for. There's like a part where she mentions that you know, one of the things they thank is the stars, and so you know, like in the middle of the pledge, it's like, oh well, if you realize that you know you can't look up and see the stars, that's also like a call to action. And she's like talking about how it's not just a pledge, but it's like a bunch of things wrapped up in one, right? And I think of how the Pledge of Allegiance is something that you like literally learn to drone out and not think about, whereas on this one it's like it forces you to be reflective and spurs you to action on other things. And it's just like a very stark contrast between the ways that you formulate your ideas of what a nation should be, what a people should be in like you know um, in advancing the ideas of that nation. So I really love this.
Yeah, this was definitely
Very
one of my favorite
creepy
chapters.
to It is so very creepy to expect kids to, without thinking about it, pledge allegiance to some random country.
Yeah, I came here as an immigrant when I was like 4 or 5, and I couldn't speak English. And even before I could speak English, I was like miming the pledge, I guess, because everyone else was doing it, and I was like, I didn't want to stick out more than I already did. So.
Yeah, our pledge is like dystopian as fuck. Like it's one of those things where I'm just like, are you sure? Like there's like this meme where it's like why read a dystopian novel when you can just look around? And I was like, dang, like yeah, and the Pledge of Allegiance is definitely one of those things where I was like, this feels really dystopian to me. Um but yeah, I this was one of my favorite chapters. And yeah, I've like thought about like when she talks about how like everyone comes to agreement, like I think there's this way where people think that's too ideal or something, or like maybe just like too utopian or something like that. And I genuinely believe that if you're focused on caretaking, then you can get to the point where you can like make agreements in trying to care for each other and everyone. And I think, I don't know, I think that's why I like this book so much, is because of just like the idea of like empathy. Like I think if we actually all were able to understand each other and empathize, you know, not necessarily that we agree on everything, but I think that I think that's like kind of like puts everything into like a binary, like you either agree or disagree, but instead the focus is about caretaking. And so like working towards a world where everyone's needs get met, that's really important. And I think it's generally doable, like most of the time, unless there's like a crisis or something like that. But in general, like we can try to like create enough stability where everyone's needs do get met. And I think that's why I love this book so much, is because like there's this way where I would talk about this stuff, especially when I was younger, and people would just be like, well, that sounds nice, but that's just not possible. And here is this person talking about how it's possible and how it's been done, and how we can keep on doing it. And yeah, I mean, she talks a lot about how like people can, I think she, in one of her last essays, I noticed she didn't use the term like how people can become indigenous, because I kind of felt a little bit weird about that because of the way that I could see white people using the term. But in this other essay, she talks about how people can become naturalized. And I'm like, yeah, like, you know, like by caretaking, you know, or like that place can also like still be your home, like if we take care of it. And she was saying like with white people, like everyone has ancestors that were indigenous somewhere, and those ancestors took care of the land, and how this is something that us as all of humans can get back to. So I really appreciated that, because it's very exciting. It's like, oh, because like, okay, so I've been watching this show called Moonhaven, and they have like this colony on the moon where they like try to figure out how to like live, you know, like in this like utopian society. And it's created and dictated by an AI, where it's like, oh, if you live in this way, then it's going to probably be really good for humans. But it's like, well, indigenous people have already been doing that. And so it's kind of frustrating that this like show centers an AI as if it's like a new thing. But yeah, all that to say, like, I think it's really cool that like humans have done this. It's something that we can get back to. It's not this completely new thing that humans have never done before. Yeah, any other thoughts on that, or any other chapters people want to start bringing up?
I don't know if it was the same chapter or a different chapter, but I remember, because I mostly listened to it, but I remember a part where she was talking about how a lot of people that come and settle here, it seems like they have one foot here and one foot elsewhere. Like they're not sure if they're going to stay here forever, and like their actions kind of reflect that. I don't remember what chapter that was, but I remember that.
Yeah. I definitely remember her talking about that a lot, where it's like you need to live as if like this place matters. You need to live as if your, you know, your grandkids are going to live here. I think she talks about like how something about like 7 generations past and 7 generations forward, and like that the understanding of time, like being able to go that far back and then thinking that far forward as well, which is a sense of time that we don't have. Like I remember hearing about my great grandma because my grandma would talk about her, and that's all I really know. And that's, yeah. And I think people just have a very different sense of time. And I think also because this land is settled, I mean, I could be wrong, because I think even places like in Europe, there's still just like capitalism and white supremacy, but yeah, people just don't care, I think, because of the economic state of the world, like because of capitalism and white supremacy. Like those lines to caretaking have been largely cut off in favor of this economic system that exploits people in the world. But yeah, I went on a little bit of a rant. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay. Well, I guess we'll keep going. Yeah. Okay, also people I was wondering if people could people take their mics off mute? That way like we can just like all hop in for talking if no one has like too much background noise maybe. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
down.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Okay, well I'll just mention my favorite chapter. Um I think probably my favorite chapter was Asters and Goldenrod. And I love that she like I love oh shoot, someone's micro dang it, someone's microphone just started
Oh,
being really
Clark.
fucked up. Clark, it might be
Clark.
you. Okay, it stopped. Um I love in the chapter Asters and Goldenrod, I love how like all the shade she throws at academia because I feel like I experienced that even though I was in a completely different major, like just being a philosophy major, like just the way that people are so pompous and condescending and but she talks about how like she's like I want to learn about botany because it's beautiful. This person's like like you want to learn about botany's not beautiful. Like you don't talk about it like that. And she's like okay, like and then she like has like she talks about like the way that she like marries like this poetry of beauty and science is so beautiful. How like well I think asters and goldenrod are beautiful and so do bees and bees the purple and yellow is what allows the bees to see to know or like to be even more notified that they can pollinate there um and the same thing that is beautiful to me is beautiful to the bees. So actually, what is beautiful? Think about that. And I just really liked that. I think that there's a way like that's like really actually unhelpful and unhealthy in Western society where like science is not something that like science is literally just empiricism. It's not like for some reason like your emotions and how you feel about something are not to be a part of that conversation. And I think that's just ridiculous. So it was just like to me it just felt like very important that like the idea of beauty uh in the marriage of science like are not mutually exclusive things. In fact, they're two sides of the same coin and they both heavily inform us of the world around us. Like, and at the end of the day, like I think, like going back to like the idea of empiricism, like empiricism is kind of like this like binary. Like you can either observe it or you can't observe it, and it's like I think what she's getting at is it's not necessarily like a binary of like objective or not objective. Like at the end of the day, we relate to the world, and that relation what informs our relation to the world is what's important rather than existing in a binary of true or not true, which I think is like I can't stress enough that like Western thought like needs to get out of that. Um, yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it adds to that great divorce that exists in Western thought of like people separate from nature, like observing it with this general conceit that we're not a part of what we're observing, right? Like you can't say the asters and goldenrod are beautiful because then that would create a relational fiber between you and the flower, which just can't exist within Western thought. It always has to be outside observer making dictations on reality, and it's just a cold and heartless pursuit, and blind also.
Bringing to mind to me the part of the book where they're rescuing salamanders as they're trying to cross the street, and
Hmm.
how that ends up becoming a struggle between you rescue the salamanders or you do the scientific research that's necessary to get people to take the salamanders seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and how those things ended up being opposed to each other because of how it functions, is how it's said.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, that.
also brings to mind. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was looking up on the copy of Braiding Sweetgrass on archive.org, and I found a little one of the parts about salamander that says, "The very facts of the world are a poem. Light is turned to sugar. Salamanders find their way to ancestral ponds, following magnetic lines radiating from the earth. The saliva of grazing buffalo causes the grass to grow taller. Tobacco seeds germinate when they smell smoke. Microbes and industrial waste can destroy mercury. Aren't these stories we should all know?" And then it talks a little bit about stories, and that's part of it is like relation and storytelling, and how these stories that in like Western thought would be more like science, that's like documented and like passed down in that kind of indirect way, whereas in when you're more in relation to people and like the beings around you, you kind of learn to both listen to like stories get passed on to you, and then you also learn to like listen for other stories that may not have been directly passed down to you but are like being told to you all around you. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, wait, can you say that again? So, stories are something that get passed down onto you?
Yeah, like for a lot of I can't speak on like every indigenous group obviously, but like a lot of things and like ways of being and like the ways to like, for example, and there's the chapter on the cash basket, where like that kind of teaching of making those baskets, it's like passed down from generation to generation. um, and this also goes back to the grammar of animacy, where like language to generation, like there's so many languages nowadays that are endangered, especially indigenous languages, because they're that natural passing down, that natural like in a way storytelling of like this language in this language is like interrupted and suppressed and oppressed, and like the natural thing is for those stories to be passed on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I really loved how she talks a lot about like language and just it's really tragic, especially when she talks about like Potawatami language and how like um it sounds so beautiful. Like when she just talks about how like all these, was it the shore? I can't remember, but there was like she talks about like this word
To be
how,
a bay.
yeah, to be a bay, and it's like baying. It's like not just a noun, and I'm like, wow, like the world is teeming with life when you're speaking Potawatomi, like, and the way that our like that English is just like everything is dead and it's not as important because we don't see it alive. And then even like when we think about other animals, like they're like not, just because we don't like value life, like they're being, but their mode of being isn't as valid as the mode of being as humans, or it's not seen as that. And so just, yeah, I'm like, wow, I wish our language was like that. And I, I, yeah, I don't know. That was just like very profound to read about.
Even beyond that, I think the way English talks about other animals and even plants and anything that's not human, it talks about them as if they are defective, like they are defective for not being human.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, that paragraph says, "A bay is a noun only if water is dead. When a bay is a noun, it is defined by humans, trapped between its shores and contained by the word. But the verb," and I'm gonna mispronounce this, wikwegama, to be a bay, releases the water from bondage and lets it live. To be a bay holds the wonder that, for this moment, the living water has decided to shelter itself between these shores, conversing with cedar roots. and a flock of bay mergansers. Because it could do otherwise, become a stream or an ocean or a waterfall, and there are verbs for that too. To be a hill, to be a sandy beach, to be a Saturday, all are possible verbs in a world where everything is alive. Water, land, and even a day, the language a mirror for seeing the animacy of the world, the life that pulses through all things, through pines and nuthatches and mushrooms. This is the language I hear in the woods. This is the language that lets us speak of what wells up all around us, in the vestiges of boarding schools, the soap-wheeling missionary wraiths hang their heads in defeat. And this part especially, like, this is the language I hear in the woods. Like, a lot of indigenous languages are formed with the land. So, like, if you, there's a, I don't remember the exact the words for it, but there's a proverb in Uchinaguchi, which is central southern Okinawan, that says, like, if you lose your, something like, if you lose your mother tongue, you lose your motherland. Like, the land kind of can't exist without the words, and the words can't exist without the land, kind of thing. So they're very tied together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something about like indigenous. Just like I remember when I was learning about. So I grew up Christian and was like raised in like Christian spaces, and I remember like hearing about. I don't remember, but there was like this one group of people that missionaries went to, um, and they like came there and were like, hey, like we have Jesus for you to like help save you. And they're like, saved from what? We're doing fine. And they're like, and like the missionaries were shocked. And I remember reading this because I was Christian at the time and I was shocked. I was like, whoa, because I was taught my whole life that like everybody needs a savior in some type of way. And I just was like shocked. And I remember that was kind of like my first hint of like, like indigenous people, they seem like really happy. That seems like kind of cool. And I would just kind of like, and these are, I'm sure there's like exceptions or things like that. It's just like, I would just like learn more about like in certain groups of indigenous people. Like I remember learning about like a little bit about like the Bushmen, a little bit about, just I would learned about the Dakota a little bit. And I was like, these people are like really happy and they're doing really good. And they're like, also taking care of their environment. Like they actually seem like a very necessary part of the environment as opposed to like how a lot of other people are. We're like destroying the environment. And yeah, and it's something that like really struck me as beautiful is that the way that so many indigenous people live, or at least tried to before that was like wiped out, or like, because of colonization. Not that people aren't still trying to live in these ways, but colonialism made it a lot harder, was that like people were living in these very holistic ways where their relationship to the land influenced their relationship to their language, influenced their relationship to their food, influenced the relationship to how they interacted with each other. And it was all so interconnected that you couldn't really take out one thing. And I thought that was extremely beautiful because I think about how in like society, like how, or like in like a capitalist society, like we're heavily compartmentalized from each other. Like we are very lonely. We go to work away from the people we care about, and hopefully we have people we care about at work, but like we're generally like separated from our family and friends. And then we come back home and we don't have enough energy to spend time with people we care about other than just like watching a screen. And the way that we understand our food, like someone else picks our food in a very exploitative way, and then we can cook our food, or we like go out somewhere to eat. But like we're all just, everything is so heavily compartmentalized, and that seems like really like a major issue. Like we're really separated from each other, separated from the land. And something that really struck me about like a lot of indigenous groups of people, it was like the opposite. Everything was so heavily interdependent on each other, and that seemed like really beautiful and profound and just like a really healthy way to live. Anyways, I feel like I'm talking a lot. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Or
No, you brought up like so many good points. The Man, there's so much to this that like what what really stuck out to me was you know, as you're mentioning the difference between the language when you're like they the authors like you've got the living things, they're conjugated a certain way, and then the inanimate things, the things that we make, they're conjugated a different way, right? And in thinking about what Akemi said about how you know, everything, all of this is interconnected, and you said it too, Lua. I'm like, okay, well, you know, the language seems to die because you know, the practice, the ways, they're not like related anymore. Like you said, Lua, you know, the like there's no reason to have the language of that when that's not the way that you relate to the world anymore, right? And so like keeping the language alive is keeping the practices alive as well. Um, and so like one thing that really stuck out to me too in that the Pledge of Allegiance chapter was that you know, she found out about this, and she found out about it from another nation, and she was like, "Do you want? Is it okay if I share this?" And they were like, "Yes, of course, please share it. If people had known this, if they had like, you know, adapted it, then things might have been different, right?" And in thinking about that, I was like really like that was weighing heavy on me too. Is that like, what do we do with this, right? Is it okay to you know, take in these practices and like, you know, use them even though I'm not like a part of this nation, a part of this culture, or anything like that. But then in thinking about like, you know, the particular way that we're supposed to relate to things once we learn about you know, how other people do it, it's like, yeah, I really want to be able to find a way to incorporate this into the rest of my life.
Yeah, and I think that ties in with the philosophy that we've been talking about. Like when we talk about like mutual aid, like I feel like the discussion around mutual aid would really benefit from having also like this holistic, or what I would think was like a more holistic understanding of like, okay, like it's not just it's not just like humans helping each other with resources, or like I would like to think that I would like to think I would really like it if mutual aid in the discussion around it also was about like how to take care of the land and how to take care of other biotic communities and how to structure our lives around that. Like that's why I really like reading like you know, particularly like, you know, we've read like The Red Deal, reading Braiding Sweetgrass. Like I love these themes like coming back to caretaking. Because it's like this thing that's like I think is really left out of the conversation around leftism, where it's like, you know, like we want to live like in a better world, which is great, but there's like this thing that seems like when you hear about it, it seems like glaringly obvious about caretaking. Like we got to take care of each other. And that's a very emotionally vulnerable process where we're figuring out how to relate to each other. So yeah, I want to try to figure out too, like how do we can we like try to get like farther away from capitalism, um and not just like having like a revolution, but like how can we like in our lives right now try to intentionally establish these things in spite of living in a capitalist hellscape. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like putting our mind in a caretaker position is incredibly radical because I feel like even people sometimes on the left end of the spectrum will still like, we're sort of socialized as consumers, right? So sometimes it feels like, oh, I'll just start consuming left content, like, and for some people that's as far as leftism seems to go. And it's just like, no, there's like a huge part of it is caretaking, taking care of each other, getting to know your neighbors, or whatever like context you exist in that makes sense for you. You need to be giving care, you need to be giving and receiving, you know and I think that there's a lot of power in switching that brain from a consumer mind to a caretaking mind. Because in so doing, you're also taking care of yourself. Like, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah, it
would.
reminds me of. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I would add on to that I mean, obviously you often run into the argument that you know there's no people always say this is, in my opinion, somewhat of a cop out to sort of not do things on an individual level. And I mean, obviously, there's a limit maybe to what can be done there. Um, but people tend to say sometimes that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. And even though that may be true, I feel like, you know, as I kind of hinted at a moment ago, it's often said as if to say there's no unethical consumption under capitalism. So basically, the logic kind of goes, well, if everything is unethical, then I can just do whatever I want and it doesn't matter. But yeah, I would say it's it's greatly important to try to make a difference on an individual scale too, not just on a collective scale. If that kind of feeds into what you guys were talking about, I hope.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we can't forget that we're all authors of history, right? Like, we are people in these social bodies. Like, history isn't happening elsewhere. Again, getting our brain out of that consumer mindset. I'm not just consuming the news and consuming time. I'm swimming through time. We all are. And history will be written after the fact of the actions that we take collectively, but that comes down to, like, the decisions that we make also individually.
Yeah, I think
And I'm sorry, I think Akemi wanted to say something. I cut her off a moment ago. I apologize.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I use they them pronouns, by the way. I didn't mention that earlier.
Oh, they
But
them. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Sorry.
The conversation reminded me of the chapter An Offering, where I believe it's the author that's talking about, oh, this like ritual that we do that's been passed down through generations or something, where we like pour out a little bit of the coffee at the beginning, and then her finding out like, oh, it's this particular sentence. It was like, it was in the presence of ancient ceremonies that I understood that our coffee offering was not secondhand, it was ours. Um, and to make it a little personal, to recently, I think 2 weeks ago, August 10th, 11th, and 12th was the Shichiguachi or Hachiguachi, which is Okinawan Obon, which runs on the lunar cycle. And part of it is like, offerings for the ancestors and stuff. And I was recovering from COVID at the time, just things within me that just like kind of brought a lot of depression that I harbor, and like um, maybe really just not want to take care of myself, I guess. But like in taking care of like and making offerings for ancestors, like in turn it was taking care of me. Um, like you mentioned, Chris. And like because I did those offerings and because I was doing that, like I was able to have food later for me to be able to eat, even though like I always put off grocery shopping forever, but like I prioritized it a bit more this time. Um, and it was like that little bit of caretaking for ancestors that like reminded me that like I'm also worthy to be taken care of, type of thing.
yeah, I feel yeah, definitely like what she's saying about like caretaking and like it's like this like giving and receiving, and like when she talks about like I forgot what chapter this is, but like with the land, like does the land love you? And people are like, no, of course it doesn't. And she's like, but what if it could? And everyone's like, oh, that'd be great. Then like I would never hurt it, and all these things. Like, yeah, like just like I'm sorry, I'm kind of fumbling around here, but like just I don't know, there's just something really important about like being needing people and people needing you, and that actually being like a really important like motivation for like living. Like I guess trying to tie back in what you're saying, Akemi, about like taking care of your ancestors like helped you take care of yourself, and the way that they just like all kind of just like goes back into each other. Yeah, that just I don't know, that all just seems like really important. Like I think when I feel like really depressed, like a lot of times like so I struggle with like suicide, and when I feel suicidal, like I feel not needed in a type of way where I'm like, oh, I'm just like causing harm. I'm just yeah. and that's like more of an extreme for sure, but just like the needing to feel like wanting to feel needed. And because I think a lot of people will be like, oh, like depression is about like loss or things like that, but there's something like really important about feeling needed. And I think there's something, because of that, there's something really healing about caretaking. So yeah, hopefully that wasn't too rambly, but yeah.
I agree, and also like it isn't just healing to caretake, but needing to rely on foundational to human society in the first place. You can't have social animals running around not taking care of each other and being successful still. Like the reason we're able to have societies in the first place is because we learned to take care of our elderly, we learned to take care of our children, we learned to take care of disabled people within society. And capitalism makes it really easy to forget all of that because now it's we'll just leave everyone to die who's mildly inconvenient to us. But that's not how humans are supposed to work.
No, like not at all. It just like blows my mind that capitalism even exists and that we like opted in for like such a horrible society that like goes against our that goes against so many of our needs. Like it's just
Yeah.
so dysfunctional. And then all this stuff that she's talking about with climate change, because I don't know when this book was written, but I imagine it was written um probably the way that she's talking about climate change sounds like it's just before where I think of like now times. I feel like now times people are like, oh shit, like there's really intense weather patterns that we are like experiencing the consequences of. And I think she was writing it maybe like 10 or 15 years ago more so. Like I remember she mentioned iPods. So I was like, okay, like I think I have like
She
a
wrote it in, my copy says 2013.
okay. Wow. Yeah, so yeah, maybe like 10 years ago. But yeah, just before where it's like, hey, like we may not be experiencing like like directly the consequences of like extreme weather climates, or at least a lot of people in richer countries aren't. There's definitely already been a displacement of people, but that doesn't like, but we should still care. And then now we're like, it's just getting like more and more extreme, and it's like, okay, well the issue is definitely capitalism still. Like it's just like I don't know. I'm just like, what a. I don't want to be like too cynical, but it's just like, I just remember being a kid and being like, this seems unsustainable. And then just like getting older and being like, yeah, like I think
It's not.
this isn't going to work out. I'm just kind of like in shock that like our world leaders, that this is just like, that we can't just like fix this stuff, or like we can, but we're just like not, or don't have, I don't know. Yeah. Anyone?
Say hi to Silver Spook real quick.
Yeah, Silver Spook.
Put Silver Spook on the spot or anything, but hi.
Oh, hey, what's up? Sorry, I just like back because I like got up.
Yeah, I know this is like super early for you,
I saw on
right?
Twitter that it's happening. But hey everybody, aloha. I'm sorry I missed the beginning, so I'm not sure exactly where it's at, where we're at. So
Oh, we're just
trying to catch up.
flowing, just talking about things that we liked about it, and there's not really too much of a direction. Just talking about good stuff in it.
Yeah, I mean, I really but yeah, I got through it and I've been rereading like lots of bits of it because that's a really important book. I think, especially now. It's like even it gets more relevant every year and every day. So it's like, yeah, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like immediately real right now, as like our island is, well, probably all know who I am, so I'm not gonna do a big introduction. But you know, it's like watching this island is on fire right now. The U.S. military is blowing up the Mauna Kea, which is like the our sacred mountain. We've done protests for multiple projects there. They're currently bombing like dropping thousands of tons of C4 equivalent to practice making war in Asia Pacific
Wow.
right now. The whole island is on fire. The sky is all turning all black. Uh, U.S. military is claiming more of Oahu's. The Pearl Harbor, the entire like U.S. World Empire headquarters, it's already destroyed their own water supply on Oahu. They've poisoned the water, claiming more of the island's water supply because they destroyed their own. They're saying we need to use your other, there's the military bases. The whole like what 25% of the entire island that I'm from is covered in military bases. Or I already talked about that before, so I don't want to belabor it. But it's like they're like literally like look in Moana. There's that black car, or like in Spirited Away, like a no face, where it's like that black stuff that just keeps spreading.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a metaphor for all of this, but and it's like a cancer that just keeps spreading. It's like literally like cancer growing on the islands. I've already killed one of the islands is uninhabitable. My parents are like, I'm waiting for a call from my parents because they're saying that they're not, for the University of Hawaii study that said that actually like huge sections of the entire island's water supply are not usable. The university took it down the next day.
Oh wow.
Academia is completely complicit in this. Like the U.S. federal government, all of the G7 countries they're doing this huge war exercise. 26 countries, all of NATO, Europe, Canada, Japan, Australia, they're all practicing for a massive war, probably in Taiwan. Taiwan is straight right now. That's why Nancy Pelosi is there. That's why Kamala Harris is here. Kamala Harris didn't stay on my parents' island because she knows the water is dying. Went to Kauai. She didn't even stop in Oahu. She just went straight to Kauai because that island's gonna be dead. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. So the island is currently. You can feel that when they're bombing this island. It sounds like it's like thunderclaps, but they're like 3 seconds apart exactly, or it's like very weird thunder is what it sounds like. When you look at the sky, it's all black. Anyways, it's like you the chapter on the Wendigo. I don't know if you got.
Yes, we haven't gotten to that yet. Yeah.
It's like I feel like I'm like surrounded by there's like swirling Wendigos like just eating entire. Not just this. The worst is gonna happen when they start the war in East Asia, or hopefully they don't. Hopefully our relatives, our more based relatives in the rest of this region, and work together to prevent this. But anyway, I can't think about that too much, otherwise I'm gonna lose it all. So, but that's where it's like hunger that consumes all. It's like what they're literally here destroyed like the major water, like their own major water supplies, and it's like the window that eats until nothing left to eat. They're literally like just eating everything. Real time right here. Troops are all like the military. That's the thing is like watching the Navy's generals, their officers, all of these most decorated people. They're showing up and they're like they're still standing around and they're like at attention, right? Their wives are crying as their babies are all their own troops are all being poisoned, and they're just like standing like this. Need my paycheck. What are you gonna spend your paycheck on? You nuke this planet. I mean, like literally with your nuclear war, you want to start East Asia. What are you gonna eat? Even if you don't, what are you gonna eat when your like planet is dead? What are you gonna tell your little 2-year-old son who is drinking jet fuel? He grows up and he's got like permanent extreme disabilities, or his brother died because your employer killed your little baby brother. What are you gonna tell your family? You've killed this planet. What good is your $300,000 Navy colonel paycheck? They stand there and they like gaslight their own wives, their own kids. Hey, the water is fine. I don't know what you're talking about. We just gotta go make some more freaking imperial war. Stop the spread of communism in China. There's a basic comment. They just keep saying the same crap, but they don't say that part. That's why they're making this war. And we have to stop the spread of win-win global cooperation. We have to stop the spread of the return of existence and getting back into where Braiding Sweetgrass is from. But anyway, so it's pretty. But it's like everything in this book is like is it's just like every day it becomes more and more accurate, and I mean I don't know, I'm like I'm a little it's a lot, but like that's why just on like indigenous peoples, like wherever you are at, number one, do not take a vacation. It's people often say like the world's on fire. The world's on fire. This is not a time to be taking a vacation anywhere. If you could take a vacation anywhere, you should go to Cuba because they have an actual water supply, and they have a government that provides universal health care, housing, and everything else, and benefits the masses. And there's not military-based cancers eating their entire tropical islands. You can go there. I see a lot of people like tweeting like, everybody should go to Hawaii. Go to Hawaii. Don't go to Cuba.
Who's tweeting that?
The government owns the hotels.
What?
So you should, when Hawaii has nationalized hotels that provide universal health care that we had in the 1800s, and universal housing because we're the most homeless and the lowest freaking life expectancy population. When Hawaii has a sovereign nationalized everything, we own the hotels and we decide who comes here. You can come here. So I want to just make that clear. That's what indigenous land back, partially what that means. Doesn't mean that there's no tourism, but it does mean that we have to have sovereign control of our land. And but part of that means that we're giving up control of the land. And part of that means, and part of it is that if indigenous people, like if we decide, like I was like listening to what's happening in Cuba, like what the hell? It doesn't mean that there's no way to because part of it is like there's that chapter about solar power. Robin is like I think she was talking about how like went into the mall and I was trying to do the honorable harvest. I was trying to practice, but I can't do it in this mall. Everything is dead. The all of the pencils and the binders. This is disconnected and the fossil fuels. Like I can't. Another chapter is about especially about fossil fuels. Like I can't. No way I can justify sucking all this fossil fuel out of the ground. But like I feel like solar and these other renewable technologies, you could use these in a way that was in line with indigenous values. And so anyway, my point is that like there's a way that we as indigenous peoples, for one, I think something that is not talked about in the book is that a lot of, maybe it is, but I missed it, a lot of indigenous peoples, like in Hawaii, we have been brainwashed. And so sadly, we don't even know who we are. Like, because the United States has who we are out of ourselves. I talk about this with like Luano in some panels, but my mother and my father think they're not Hawaiian. They hate themselves. They're like, right? They don't even know who they are. So it's a good huge swath of us. It's very difficult, right? Because like, that's a lot of indigenous wisdom has huge parts of the solutions that we need as species, as Earth, to solve these problems that we have of capitalism, etc. Like the colonial, like I call them the unhealed descendants of the Roman trauma, but like the U.S. empire and other empires have done such a good job ripping it out of us, right? That we have to like I talk to my own relatives and they're like, wow, the military's great. Just get a job as a real estate agent, Chris. That's what we all do in Hawaii, the most super expensive place in the entire so-called United States, worse than DC and every other San Francisco. Just get a job. And I'm like, Mom and Dad, braiding sweetgrass. What the hell? Braiding what? No, we're not Hawaiians anymore. We're not Hawaiians anymore. We're all Americans. All Americans. And the ones who feel inside that they're Hawaiian won't talk about it because we have to survive. And anyway, so long story short, I mean, I don't make a long story short, I know, but anyways, it's like I think that I made this one post. I was like, I was talking to some of the other Hawaiians trying to organize, right? All like out there, right? But then some of the Hawaiians that are most of them are in academia, to be honest. They're all like, we can't have any states, man. It's like, I mean, I would love to not have a state, man. Who's actually solved these problems in the world? I mean, do you want to make a paycheck in academia? You're never gonna get tenure, dude. You're gonna get tenure. You're gonna be a fucking from a temp serf. What are you doing at the University of Toronto? There's this one Hawaiian over there, always on the TV, and he's like, Chris, you can't have a state. If we have a state that we're gonna be tanky, some bullshit, motherfucker. Like, do you want to survive or do you want to watch your parents die and make money in Toronto, doing nothing, getting books, rich white liberals to buy? You know? Do you want to do it? Do you want to materially provide for millions of people like Cuba? Do you want to live in some kind of fantasy land about 1,000 years ago who we were? Colonialism and capitalism happened, and we have to deal with that shit. You know, and but that's a kind of more inside the indigenous community conversation that we have to have because of it. The brainwashing is so deep within our own communities, and it's like, anyway. But that's it. I feel like I'm just like all over the place. But let me come back and say, I think that Braiding Sweetgrass, it's a very important book because it does make it accessible. It does take indigenous wisdom, makes it accessible to people who have a Western scientific or just a Western perspective, because it's written in the style of a really great New York Times bestseller. So I think it's very important in that sense. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I things that are in it are things that we do speak to each other about all the time. So me and Akemi, we've talked about the book many times. Other people that I've lots of indigenous relatives and people that we're associated with and people that I'm organizing with. It's like some of it's just of course, even in Hawaii, because we're thousands of miles away from Turtle Island. Things like the Three Sisters. I have an entire. Actually, I just made a game, Indigistar, which is I'm not here to pitch my games, but I made a game called Indigistar, which is set in the world of my other games. It's about water being poisoned on an alien planet, but it's about an empire comes to your planet to destroy the galactic Silk Road and poison your water, rip your resources out, and it's and a lot of that was inspired. The game it's an INDIGI Star was inspired by stuff from Sweetgrass, like the Three Sisters. I had known of pluricrop agriculture, their style of food forests and permaculture. We have some Hawaii has the Lo'i system, the Ahupua'a system that are similar. They're not the same, but they're the concept is similar as opposed to grow monocrop farming. And so stuff like that, very inspirational, and stuff like in the way that it's kind of it's like for me, I like it because it's kind of like seeing yourself, other indigenous persons' eyes, and not just Robin's, but also other people that she speaks about in the book. Like there's Anishinaabe people, she's Potawatami, and then there's and then the study was very important too. There's that study where nobody believed that indigenous people harvesting sweetgrass could possibly be beneficial, right? Because there's recently a thread I think in left Twitter that was like, have to leave that half of the planet has to just have humanity removed from it and let there be virgin forests again. And there was this it was and it was a white person saying this, and it was it's very doctrine of discovery, terra nullius. It's it's a good coming from a good place. We need to let nature rewild and nature again. But it's kind of that means we take all the humanity off of it, but then it discounts the thousands of years that indigenous people had been on Turtle Island, right? It wasn't just no human activity, right? And actually the human activity thousands of years in North America was not only sustainable, but it's actually necessary to the continued existence of many biomes and many ecological ecosystems. And there's actual Western scientific study at the protest of lots of men-dominated Western science, right? Where Robin leads the picking sweetgrass study, and it actually shows indigenous people actually doing human activities in those regions not only maintains but actually increases the amount of sweetgrass, and I thought that was really important too, because that's one that might start people who are super resistant. They're oh, these indigenous people, they're just a bunch of superstitious backward savages, they might not say that, but they're thinking that. Even I was thinking that because I've been brainwashed by U.S. empire to hate myself, right? Most of my life. Um, anyways, that's just like my general points, and sorry, it's like went all over the place, but yeah, I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I really this book has really made me think about a lot about like humans. Like, I really love how much it goes against like humans are the disease, um, rather than humans have actually been living um, in or have been a crucial part of the environment for caretaking, and yeah, I just think that's like really important that we have like that we remember that. Like when I was younger, I used to be like, oh my gosh, like humans are the disease. I used to really be in that mindset, and actually I'm really glad it's shifted to like, okay, it's like white supremacy and capitalism, and we actually just need to get back to like a form of caretaking. Um, hey
Real quick,
Jeremy.
Lua, can you check your message? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Actually, I think your mic.
Oh, it's picking up background noise?
I think so.
Okay.
But oh, I see. Okay. Yes. I send that. Oh, um oh wait, does anyone have anything else? I want to ask Silver Spook question, but I don't want to cut anyone off if they wanted to respond to like what Silver Spook just said.
Well, I would just say that, or I just wanted to say really quickly that I think that none of that was all over the place. I think that was completely on point, and I really enjoyed listening to it. And I think it was very related to the topic and very insightful. So yeah, but that's all I wanted to say.
And I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
Oh, it's fine. It's whatever. We're just chilling. We're just talking about books. Like, yeah. Um, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about so going back to the Wendigo, she has this chapter. Oh wait, did I? Sorry, I'm like doing two things. She has this chapter at the end called "Defeating Wendigo," and it ends with her where she like talks about like she's like talking about the Wendigo, and she says he drinks down the compassion of witch hazel, the respect of cedars, a blessing of silver bells, all sweetened with the maple of gratitude. You can't know reciprocity until you know the gift. He is helpless before their power. His head falls back, leaving the cup still full. He closes his eyes. There's just one more part of the medicine. I am no longer afraid. I sit down beside him on the newly greening grass. Let me tell you a story, I say as the ice melts away. She fell like a maple seed pirouetting from the autumn sky. And I thought that was a very sweet ending. And I'm also like curious, like your thoughts about like you're saying that like Silver Spoon, you're talking about how like yeah, basically in Hawaii right now it's like full of Wendigos. And I'm curious, like her solution is like you give people who are Wendigos like care, and you give them like you talk to them about like the importance of like the earth, and kind of fill their cup, and that will like heal the Wendigo. But I was reading that and I was like, that sounds great, but also right now people need to just like stop. And I was curious like what like if you applied her solution to Hawaii right now, like what your thoughts are on like dealing with this kind of like Wendigo situation.
Let me just like check that. You're talking about the part where she's like in the Wendigo, like lures the Wendigo in, and then is like feeding the Wendigo this like elixir or soup of these different plants, and then the Wendigo eats it and eats it and eats it, and then starts vomiting up, and then what is it? The Wendigo, it's like it vomits up the oil comes out. It reminds you of that scene from Spirited Away, right? When the no
Yes.
vomiting out the planes and the bombs and the fossil fuel and the all of the all the coltan and copper you stole from Africa. It's like the Wendigo is it's like I do think like this is like a really hard problem. Like it's when I was making that game, I was like thinking about this. Like I'm like, what is the solution though? What is the solution? Because it's always like in like the in like I don't know, in games it's like they are power fantasies in a certain sense, right? Like most movies, and it's like the Marvel movies, right? In all the action movies, you just pick up a really big gun, you know, and in an FPS you just pick up a gun and you blow all the bad people away. You be the good guy with the gun. In Marvel, you just punch really hard, get bitten by mutant spiders, or just fall into a pit of toxic waste, or like I don't know, get some gamma radiation up inside you. I watched She-Hulk the other day. Pretty base, but it's like you just like get really strong and hit people really hard, beat up bad guys, and that's it. And it's like, and that is a Western capitalistic imperialistic, call it Western barbarism, but it's like that the solution is you beat up the bad people. Number one, you have your CIA propagandize everybody to tell you who the bad people are, and then you send everybody over there to go beat them up, right? Like kill everybody in Yemen and take their stuff, and that's how we'll solve France's energy crisis, right? That's what they're doing right now. And so that's that like, and I'm somebody who like I play a lot of Doom. John Romero is also an indigenous creator who basically invented the genre. I like me some action, but it's also like what Robin is correct in the sense that people do need to like alter their ways, and what she's kind of making, the point that she's making there is that like the book itself is the medicine for the Wendigo that is in everybody. You speak English, you're already speaking a Romance languages, which means you're already partially imperial. I always say I'm half stormtrooper, right? The reason why you're speaking English because you are a descendant of the Romans who eradicated whatever was indigenous about Europe, lots of it. I mean, especially Western Europe, and then they spread their cancer into the United States, and then they spread it into us, and it's already in you. Part of it's already in you. You speak any Romance language in a certain sense. Not to say that you're like bad, but it's just like some of that's in you, and the way to get it out cannot be tin out of you. It cannot be. You can't punch anybody so hard capitalism stops. But that's just you can't shoot anybody so good, that it goes away. You can't bomb anybody like so expertly. You can't shoot a Raytheon or Lockheed missile at anybody so well, right? But that's the solution that the U.S., that NATO, again, Western Europe and the United States, right? You look at it's like, and the Holy Roman Empire, the Catholic Church over there apologizing, right? Canadian Indigenous people. It's just really the same. Not just I'm speaking in huge like multi-thousand year swaths, but that cannot at the end of the day be removed by like in the game I was thinking about. I was like, I do not know the full solution, and any honest Indigenous person will not come if an Indigenous. I shouldn't speak for all Indigenous people, but if an Indigenous person comes to you and says, "Got this book, if you buy this book and you read this thing, this is gonna solve the world's problems," that they've already taken on too much of the imperial ways. There is like I do not have all the solutions. I'm just here to be like I'm just trying to figure this thing out. The other Native Hawaiians that I know that I respect, there's lots of the ones that not to say that I disrespect Native Hawaiians. We're all fucking confused, like I said, part of being colonized, right? They will say like I do not know all the solutions, but I know this is the trajectory you want to move in. This is like some of the things we can do. But one thing I know is that I'm not like a pacifist, right? But that's a question in the game. It's like it was really hard. This is really hard. Imagine you're like a country that wants to make war with the United States and you have nuclear weapons. Just imagine, right? Imagine you're like I don't know, somewhere in a communist party of a large country that has nuclear weapons, and the United States is like don't want no war. You're like Jackie Chan. You're like I don't want no trouble, man. I just want to trade and let's just deal with COVID and climate change, right? But imagine there's some other people over there that are like, what we want to do? We just want to keep punching people and shooting them and blowing them up. You happen to have nuclear weapons, and so do we. And we're the two. And the other country is like, look at what you're doing. Look at what you're doing. If you start a war with us, you're gonna end all life on this planet. Even if you don't, you're gonna disrupt global everything. and we're gonna fall back to kind of spiral downwards because of your wars. Your wars are why your own people are starving and don't have health care, they don't have housing, and your environment, you have wildfires because you keep wanting to blow everything up, and it's kind of like, on the one hand, you have to defend yourself, right? Like, if you're being attacked, but it's very similar to like being, a non-white person or somebody like in or indigenous person in Hawaii going, please stop blowing up my island. Stop shooting and blowing everything up, right? It's kind of like, you shoot like on Mauna Kea. If we were to like take a gun up to, so many people will say, tell Hawaiians, you white leftists from North America somewhere, why you should all just take a bunch of guns and then overthrow the U.S. empire. You just go to the military bases and shoot them. On Mauna Kea, you should have just started violence. Why are you doing it peacefully, right? Mauna Kea is our sacred mountain that we have to stop this action. Why are you just standing there peacefully? You should just like do a revolution. One time I read about this revolution in Venezuela, or I read about this thing in Vietnam. And I know I have lots of Vietnamese relatives. I'm constantly talking to them. Like, they're not gonna tell. The difference is Luna doesn't tell me, Silver Spook, you should do your thing this way, because Luna knows better. Luna knows better than that. That there is different material conditions and realities, and that for each people in each circumstance. If we were to do that, there would be no Hawaiians. I have relatives in Taiwan. They're all dead because the Japanese chemically gassed them into extinction. They tried one time, pick up a bunch of guns. They shot back, and then they were wiped out, and it was justified. It was justified. There would be zero Hawaiians if we, at various points, chose the wrong strategy to resist in the wrong way. In the face of the world's largest, most powerful empire with all the guns and all the bombs and all the disinformation to justify their massacres. Americans don't largely have a lot of problems with everything they've done in Iraq and Afghanistan. Millions of people have died there, and most Americans are like, well, so there would be zero Hawaiians left. There would be no Hawaiians left if we chose the wrong solution. It's not because we are personally pacifists. It's because anyway. So
that's such a good point, though.
It's incredibly. It just. What I want, part of what that game I was thinking about is I want people to feel as frustrated as I do all the time. It's like, they're killing you, they're poisoning your children, they're blowing your mountains up, you're all going to prison. Hawaiians are like, it's actually like 1.6 than even the 2.2 black people are 2.5 times more, I think, per capita incarcerated in the United States as white people, right? It's horrible statistics. And Hawaiians are actually just realized we're actually like almost 2 times more incarcerated than even black people in the United States. It's like, I didn't know this till 6 months ago, and I was like, what the hell? And so, anyways, it's all terrible. There should be nobody toxic prisons in the United States. Period. Right? But anyways, my point is that like they keep doing these things, and then people either say there's no problem. Sometimes the worst is when it's leftists. They're like, guys don't have. It's usually the right and the center of empire. Like, guys don't have any problems. Just enjoy the roads we gave you. No, you didn't. Like we are industrialized. We had universal health care in 1859 when you guys were over there, all dying from cholera and spreading plagues. And anyways, and you destroyed the socialism that we had that was more like Cuba and Vietnam, 1890s, with your illegal occupation. You're still killing us. And like, no, we're not. And the left is like, you guys should just pick up a bunch of guns and shoot at Pearl Harbor, and I'm sure they'll solve things. Because I read about some bullshit in the book, and I don't know anything about struggle because I haven't been in it. Just read about it. And it's like, anyway, so that's that. All of that is very, very. That's frustrating, and it's frustrating to have to deal with the imperialists that are just like smiling, going, "Look at all these idiots that we've made by writing all their books and being the CIA Wurlitzer jukebox that tells all of the Western everyone what to do all day long." And they show up like Kamala and they take a little vacation and they smile and they go, "Look at us with our motorcade. Hold your sign or shoot at us. We win either way." And it's anyway. So anyway, it's all. The answer to the question is like, it is not true that like, I think that part of the solution must require you know, educating people. Because part of what Robin's saying, like, this book is here to help people who are not willing to listen to indigenous people, whatever reasons of racism, colonialism, brainwashing, all the same kind of brainwashing. Why people say wrong things all the time, and they piss me off. I have to be, but you know, that's why I look at our East Asian relatives and I go, how are you guys so patient with these people who have been saying Wuhan flu and you guys are the problem, you guys are all bad, you guys are bad, and they're looking back. The East Asians are looking back. The rest of the world, the global South, is all looking back at the United States and they're going, why are you saying all of this wrong, ridiculous stuff? You know, that's mostly the feeling is mostly frustration, right? Then you cannot come back and go, you know what, you're pissing us off so badly. We just like stop sending you all of the medicine and products. How about we just shoot at you? What you keep saying we're so aggressive. What if we actually shot at you? Like, even just economically, what if we just blow you all up? You know? It's like, no, we can't do that, because like at the end of the day, like we as I say, right, we can't we have to like defend ourselves, right? But at the end of the day, it is gonna take people. Like, you can't shoot and punch Marvel superhero your way out of the problem. Like, we have to like educate people. We have to defend ourselves. But it's you know, so wrapped up. Like in Vietnam, 98% of those people are indigenous, and there's percent that are not, and that's a totally different material circumstance. And also, if you're in a direct military conflict, you know, you have to. It's a different material condition. You know, it's a different on the ground condition. That's not desirable, right? All warfare is bad. Like, I don't feel good about wars that are happening in Europe and in Asia and all over the place, right? And so, like, we have to like defend ourselves and like, you know, but at the same time, if we choose the incorrect solutions, we will go extinct as indigenous peoples. The military and the empire will use that as a justification. Look how violent the Hawaiians are. That's what they wanted. They were sawing Hawaiian flags in half to get us to attack the police and military. The world's largest police and military organization was in 2018 on Mauna Kea. There were 10,000 plus soldiers and U.S. military. They brought B-52s and they were bombing that mountain while we were up there to scare us. They brought Black Hawk choppers and they were flying the military copters over all of our tents to terrorize us and go. And then they were sawing flags in half. They're doing everything possible to try to get Hawaiians to like punch or shoot at the cops and the military. They could just look how violent these Hawaiians. Look at the Hawaiians. They're so disorganized. They have needles. They have toxic. There's just they don't. It's not a sacred mountain. They're pissing and they're pooping all over their own mountain. The Hawaiians, they're not for real. These are just a bunch of blackbirds. They're trying to call us. The governor came out and said these Hawaiians, they're not real Hawaiians. They just want to take pictures for Instagram. These people are all just trying to sell their books. I know them. They're all in the University of Toronto and NYU trying to sell their books. But the ones on the mountain, we were actually over here for something real, you know? Not just the mountain, we're here for the end of this fucking occupation. But what they wanted was for us to lose our patience. This is the number one thing I think is like one of the hardest lessons that, you know, has to be learned. You have to have patience. Not that you're non-violent per se, but you have to have like, as indigenous people in that situation, we have to have like patience. We also have to like do the harder work that is like, I don't even know. I don't know, but I do know that it takes people getting educated, and through whatever means possible. You know, that's why I try to do these streams. That's why I try to do these. Whenever I make games that I'm trying to like. My own game. It's kind of like Braiding Sweetgrass. It's like you think you're just reading a book for fun, and then you're actually, oh my god, I'm actually like realizing things I need to change. If Robin just said, "Hey everybody, indigenous people have the solution. You should read this book," everybody would be like, "What are you talking about? You know, what are you talking about? You don't know anything. You guys are all like you're like some kind of noble savages. I don't know. You're just like, I don't know." Right? Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that like it's. I've asked myself, what do I do? Should I just like Naruto run at the U.S. military base? My parents are being poisoned. Imagine your family's being poisoned. Somebody much more powerful than you, right? If you do a peaceful solution, maybe they don't hear you. If you stand with a sign, they don't hear you. If you do a violent solution, they wipe you out. If you do anything, if you try to educate people, well, they delete your accounts. And if you try to educate them formally, if you go to university, you don't get tenure and then you don't get paid and you don't get promoted. If you, right? So it's like, that's one thing when I said, my thing is like, when the Hawaiians, some of the people who are like, have to do with this ourselves, we have to do this ourselves. And it's a certain tendency that's like, to say there's something wrong with that tendency, but it's like, we need a larger leverage from more powerful planetary indigenous relatives and other relatives, because that's one thing I think that we have to, as indigenous people, we have to, and as people generally, we have to recognize that we have to like individually and even within individual nations, we will not be capable of doing this ourselves. This doesn't mean we can't just be like, hey Vietnam, can you come save us? Vietnam, send us all of your greatest warriors and kick their ass like you kick America's ass and France's ass 2 times. And you can do that. That's not how this works. You know, I've actually talked to people from multiple large communist countries and socialist countries. You know, they're like, Silver Spoon, we want to bring you onto this TV, and I'm like, interview these people because they're actually more in it. You know, and that is a part of it. They don't, but the thing is, they don't even know how to do that. And so even for them, even for huge countries that are like the #1 enemies of capitalism, number one, you should recognize that if the United States puts a country up as the #1 enemy, that doesn't mean they're like the most perfect thing, but you should understand that there's a reason they're doing that, you know. We are, the answer is we are looking that way, and that's going to be that's part of it. But part of it is like my work personally is like I have to try to do whatever I can to try to help educate as many. I'm currently writing I'm not writing a book. There's this person, Lee Mahana, he's another native Hawaiian. He's the people that's like leaving the U.S. military. That's a major problem. So he's writing a book called Kanaka Socialism. Kanaka Maoli is the native Hawaiians. He's writing a book about actual history. Like me and Holly, we're like, Holly's my partner, and we're trying to develop, because there isn't a curriculum that's like about the true history for Hawaii, like in Hawaii, right? So we're trying to make some kind of like a history course and just a K-12 educational curriculum that will educate, can help to educate our people, you know, to get them to get the Wendigo poison out of them. One of the things is, that's why we don't send our kids to school, because all K-12 Western schools, you know, it's all brain poison. You learn 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, America. You can't even teach history in America. That's one of the major problems, right? To educate kids. 330 million people and other children. It's illegal to teach even CRT, which is not even as left as it needs to be. You know, you know, if 330 million people all had like Braiding Sweetgrass, and then like all of the actual wisdom being fed to them every day from birth till 18 or 26 or whatever years you go to school, wouldn't have all these plus the media. But like, and so that's the one that's like, I feel like that's one of the major things where it's like, if we didn't have to like detoxify all the Wendigos, people like as Ho Chi Minh once said, right, if you want socialism, you have to have socialist human beings. And you have 97 million people who go from K to 12. They know what communism is from age of 4, and then they're just like, they know actual world history. They're not living in some kind of fantasy land where the United States is the great beacon on the hill, right? So, yeah, and I know this is like in many places, but the reason I'm doing that is because there isn't a solution, and that Braiding Sweetgrass, part of it, but Braiding Sweetgrass doesn't have all. I have some disagreements with Robin. You know, like some I'm like, you know, I was thinking like, yeah, I mean, you know, not everybody will read a New York Times bestseller and then change, you know, and that's, you know, but that's not to say that that's not part of the solution. That is part of the solution. But I'm like, I can't come and say that, well, you're wrong, this is the solution, because I also don't know it. But I know that part of it is resisting, educating, and figuring out. I often say, like, even when you're on social media, you're on the Death Star satellites, and I'm saying, well, why do you guys keep giving me Death Star satellite access? You should all listen and this and follow that and learn this. So it's like, because, you know, at the end of the day, it is informational, it is narrative warfare. It is war is to be won not in the space of, as I said, shooting and punching and throwing missiles and even hulking out and smashing something really hard. The war is going to be fought inside of everybody's heart and everybody's mind. CIA knows this. That's why they spend so much money and time paying off all the would-be left influencers and getting them to do patriot socialism or some bullshit. And just manipulating all information everywhere in school and in books and in the social media. So that's where this has to be won. If you want to punch it out, there's nuclear war and then we're all dead. Let's not do that. Has to be fought in this very complicated way of moving people in directions away from that in ways that are not obvious. Like there's somebody will probably invent some. I try to do my best with like just talking and streaming and writing and in the games, because that's my Wendigo poison, because everybody's gaming more. The number of hours people spend gaming is more than reading and watching movies combined, right? So I'm like, if you're all gonna play games, don't play Call of Colonialism. I'm sorry, Call of Duty. Play. I don't know, you have to play my games, but you should play something. You're gonna actually remove some of the poison rather than install it, because that's what FPS shooters do, especially the big ones. Is they number one recruiting tool for the U.S. military, and also they establish this narrative that you can shoot all the bad people and then get rid of bad stuff, rather than kill and Anyways, that's it.
Oh my gosh, I love when you're like, I'll just stop there, and then it's like done. But yeah, that was like a very enlightening response. Like, yeah, it's something that like, like, well, like just like the with that you pointed out, just like the like people have to respond. There's like a limitation based on people's material conditions and how we can, or how people in general can respond to oppression. And yeah, like if you responded with violence, like Hawaiians would be dead. It would just be wiped out. So it's like you have to take that into consideration. And I guess that sounds like really obvious to me. And also I've just been learning about like more, like revolutionary action. Like we read Blood in My Eye, where George Jackson is literally fighting against the state. And that also ended with him dying, and his brother died too, and trying to fight for that. A number of Black Panthers were systematically killed off because of them standing up to the state. And there's definitely something, I really admire how the Black Panthers stood up to the state, and not just did that like through being militarized, but also like had mutual aid networks created. And also there is something to be learned about like, yeah, the government systematically killed off everybody. And I felt so complicated when I read that book, because I was like, okay, it seems like there needs to be some level of militarization. And then also, like, it seems like we're going to not succeed because it's literally U.S. imperialism. So you just like saying like, just talking about like, how in Vietnam, like Vietnam could do that because of their material conditions. And then how you're talking about Hawaii, and Hawaii is in their own unique material conditions. And so like you're listening to that, and that informs how you respond. It's not just like, well, you should respond with violence or you shouldn't. And then, yeah, education is a huge part of that. Like all of us need to be educated. I think for me, like I was like, okay, like education is the only answer. And I'm, when I read things like Blood in My Eye, I was like, okay, like we need to talk about getting militarized. But that doesn't, like what you're saying though, like that responding to the situation based on your material conditions is like kind of the short of it. And that's really tricky and complicated, and it's going to look really different depending on the different situations. So yeah, I just really appreciate that response. It kind of helped me think about a lot of this stuff. So yeah.
I just wanted to say, because I mean, yeah, I know, the Black Panthers is another great example, right? Because like, as people of color and Black people in places like the United States, like how do you respond? And you have to be, this is not to say like we can't Monday morning quarterback there, the actions people have taken, but if you look at what has happened, right, it's like it's a very difficult situation, right? If there was a solution, I feel like it would have been taken, but like, and yeah, the U.S. is very good. West has evolved very well. They don't have a lot of technologies, but the greatest successes, like paper came from Asia, the Constitution came from the Iroquois. The contribution that the United States and the Western world has made to humanity is how to destroy positive change. they have very advanced ways of COINTEL and the thing you're talking about. So and you have to like take all of that into consideration, and it does like it's like yeah, you have to choose the solutions that are appropriate to. And it's not going to be given. That's something that a lot of people miss, right? Like as you're saying, it's like you have to people that are in the struggles like know a lot. They don't know everything, but they know a lot, the most about where they are right in that struggle. Like I don't know as much as you would, or a lot of people would, about the struggle inside of the continent, Turtle Island, and but that's not enough to just know your situation. You also have to know history. You have to know and you have to know global history. You have to know lots, and so that's where education, like if you do education, is super important. And you notice the successful places that did successfully build some kind of socialism and undo imperialism and capitalism to some extent, super educated, right? Like Hawaii had the highest literacy rate in the world, 98% in the 1800s, and that was necessary. It's not just like it is both a byproduct of socialism that people get very educated, but it's also a necessity to create and to maintain that, because you're dealing with some of the most powerful entities are very good at stopping change from with a variety of violent, not less violent, manipulating the mind methods. So you need to maintain that, and any crack that opens up will use at all times. The siege of imperialism never stops, right? So yeah. So anyway, try not to. Yeah. So I just want to say, like, I totally agree, and I think that it's like the Wendigo story is important, and of what we have to do, and also education. It's like it's not like while you're organizing, and because Ho Chi Minh is like they're reading the books like in the as the bombs are dropping. Like Kwame Ture has that one like in the tunnels, right, as they're being bombed, and he has to he's like crawling into the tunnels, and they're like the Vietnamese like are reading books as they're being shelled, and the dust is falling, and then the person reading is just like blowing the dust off, and they just keep reading. They're reading like leftist books. While they're in the struggle, you're also educated. Like on Mauna Kea, lots of education was happening. Now that wasn't like it was a military and police confrontation on that mountain, and there was like classes. Lots of people have said I got more education from like 2 weeks on Mauna Kea than 4 years at the University of Hawaii, a so-called place of Hawaiian learning, right? So it's like some of the education happens in that way, and you have to like integrate those experiences people in the Black Lives Matter struggle, right? While you're there doing this, right? You're getting a visceral experience of like this is part of who we are as quote unquote United States of America, right? And then you're also like learning from listening to people and meeting people and building. Lots of people like on their partners, in these struggles, their life partners, like on Mauna Kea, like some of the leaders, because it's things are more real than they've ever been. That's part of the education too. And so, anyway, I'm gonna stop. I've gone off for so long. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I will read the blood in my eye.
I think it's a really important read. Like, even if you don't agree with George Jackson's solutions, just reading, like, I've read about like so many like people like going like socialist revolutions and people going against the state, but like reading about that happening in the US, like it was like it was just very like important to read and understand that happened. And I guess for me, like maybe people already understood this, like the possibilities of like fighting back and what that might look like, and like learning from things they've done and learning from things they did quote unquote right or incorrectly. It just was a really important read. But yeah, just kind of thinking what you're saying, like, yeah, like when like during the BLM protest, like I feel like I saw so much play out in stuff that I had read, like COINTELPRO. I was like, oh, this is it. Like I've read about this and this is exactly what's happening. And just, yeah, there's just like something, even though like I don't have as much faith in protests, like being able to get a lot done, I still think they're really important as far as like the people being able to come together. And yeah, I don't know. There's just like so much that I learned that to this day is really important to me, that like was directly informed from just kind of showing up and trying to help foster what was happening there. um yeah. um well, since we've talked about the Wendigo a little bit, I wanted to talk about it a little bit more and just talk about like what it is. When she first talks about the Wendigo story, I think, actually, let me just like read this quote. Wendigo footprints. So she just said, oh, actually, let me, it was in the book. So she says, this is on 307, cautionary Wendigo tales arose in a common-based society where sharing was essential to survival, and greed made any individual a danger to the whole. In the old times, individuals who endangered the community by taking too much for themselves were first counseled, then ostracized, and if the greed continued, they were eventually banished. The Wendigo myth may have arisen for the remembrance of the banished, doomed to wander hungry and alone, wreaking vengeance on the ones who spurned them. It is a terrible punishment to be banished from the web of reciprocity, with no one to share with you and no one for you to care for. And I just read that and I wrote spooky because like that sounds legitimately like the premise for a horror story, and it just sounds like absolutely horrific. And also like when she points out like this is literally like what society values, like a society values like a Wendigo mentality, and I'm like, that's terrifying. So I just wanted to read that quote because it was spooky.
Just real quick. I'll pause this real quick. Wendigo, it has been used in this book called I think is it Trail of Lightning. Rebecca Roanhorse is an indigenous fantasy here, and I'm pretty sure the Wendigo is a horror, one of the horror entities in that book. Yeah, Trail of Lightning, if I'm not mistaken. Just because you mentioned Wendigo, it sounds like a horror creature. I mean, it is. It's kind of a, it's a multi-thousand-year-old horror story. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have any thoughts on Wendigo or want to move on to a different section they really liked?
Yeah, one other chapter that I really liked that we didn't talk about so far is, well, actually, there I liked all of this book, but the one that's sticking out to me is the one where, because as Silver Spook was saying, the academia is a big part of what's going on here. Is that like considering the factors that academia plays into it when they're like uh, doing the experiments to find out who was right about whether you should pull the squeakgrass directly out
Mm-hmm.
or not. And the way that they're like, okay, well, you have to talk to the scientists in a way that they understand, because like at first uh, they came and they were like, we reject this outright, right? And then they went ahead and did it anyway, and they like curtailed their like findings in order to say to them and like, hey, we proved that you should have been independent of the nature all along. It brings up like two things for me. One is just like constantly as a teacher I'm thinking about like I have to find the right way to bridge the divide between my students who are not as immersed in academia as my coworkers are, and like just being like, hey, do you remember when you were a kid and you didn't always like think in this school mindset? Can we get back to that? Is that a thing? So that's like the one thing. But then the second thing is that like in thinking about the way that this works in my like practical real life, it's like I live in a city. I live in Houston, and a lot of what I'm thinking about is urban caretaking. In the sense that okay, the this house isn't real, but it's like living to me still, if that makes sense. It's like in this, and like Robin brings up the there's this person who is like when she's asking, what do you have a relationship with? He's like, my car. And that ends tragically for him. But I'm like, no, this is actually like kind of real to me too. Is that like, my car is the place where I'm like at home. It like it understands me and I understand it, right? And it's like, in a sense, that's bad and like move away from it. But also, it's like that's kind of like, my material reality now is that like, how can we think about like, even taking care of and respecting the inanimate objects?
Yeah.
That's just kind of like a thought that I ended up going down. And I was wondering if y'all have thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the main things that I read where I was like, what the fuck? Like that story where she was like, I knew someone and they really liked their car and they tried to kill themselves in their car and he like just didn't know nature enough. I was kind of just like that there's something about that like that just seemed like really dismissive of like this person's suicidal ideation and then dismissive of like this person feels like really comfortable in their car. And I do think like there's that other chapter where she has like she's interacting with the students, she's worried that she won't convey like the importance of the land, and then the land like and then like they actually end up understanding it and she realizes the land was the teacher. And like I do suspect like I'm someone who grew up playing in the mud, playing outside, and I really, really have grown up caring about nature because of my childhood in a way that like not everyone really has gotten. And so I kind of get stressed out when people are like, I just don't like going outside. I want to be inside. I want to go glamping if I ever camp. And I'm just like, what? Like, but so I do suspect that there is something a little bit more inherent about being divided from nature as human beings. But using that person's story about them trying to commit suicide and then kind of like dismissing that they feel safe in their car and that should be fine. Like that felt judgmental in a really unnecessary way to me when I read that. And yeah, I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. Um yeah, like Jeremy, I think it's valid if you feel comfortable in your car. Like I don't think it's bad at all. Like yeah.
Well, thanks. But and I get what you're saying, but also like just in thinking about like I mean also that car is like legitimately a bad thing. Like I can't necessarily like try to act like, oh well, I should be having a caretaking nurturing relationship with the car. Like, it's kind of something that you put up with because you don't have a choice, or like, that's the way that it should be. But thinking more broadly than that, it's like the this book is very rightly, it's about caretaking for nature and nature taking care of us. But the house that I'm in, I don't think I'll ever consider that nature. But I do think that it's something that we should care about, and I don't really know how to like coalesce or factor that in, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The streets that we're on that are paved and very much not alive, but also that should be like cared for, like doing cleanups and maintenance, and like not just letting things fall into disrepair. It's like this is my nature sort of for large portions of the day, and then it's also kind of not, kind of shouldn't be. And it's like finding out where I fit in with that. I don't know. Do any of y'all live in like very very urban cities?
I mean, I just want to jump in because like what you're saying is like very very important. Like, and I had to say, I'm not alone in that. I'm a native indigenous person, and I'm saying that as somebody who has lived in my car, sometimes not by choice, but that also like it's a place when we had no other space, being homeless in Hawaii, living in your vehicle, but also just like being in the vehicle, you have more control than other spaces, especially if your house, if you're living 20 to a house and you have no personal space, sometimes the car is the only place that you're like actually have some control, anyways. And like it's I also felt, I was like, I don't know, Robin, like I don't know if I agree with you on it. That's some of the ones that I have disagreements about. It's like nature is, oh, indigenous people are not a monolith. It's another thing you have to remember, which is that the I have not just Robin. Like this is not. And I don't like. I don't think that Robin. I don't think the book is wrong, right? It's like on particular topics. Like I just brought up one of them. Like there's another native wine, right? I don't want to say who. He's like in this struggle. He's done many important things and helped a lot of people get educated on things. He's at the Oahu Water Protectors actions, but I disagree with him on these topics. Like how do we forward? It's kind of like if nature. I made a thread recently in response to something that he said, or he keeps saying. It was like thousands, like we as indigenous people cannot go back to the old growth forests and which was amazing, and it's amazing when you watch Predator, the Predator movie called Prey, which has like actually some illustrations of some of this, like the way that if you look closely, I was noticing lots of things. Even reading Braiding Sweetgrass and looking at what's happening, there's lots of little incidental things in that movie that show way things that some of the actual ecosystems in the ways 300 years ago. But I say like it's also a science fiction movie with invisible aliens that come from outer space and then you have to fight them. But yeah, for all the action fans, which I am. That's part of being an indigenous person. That's why I love Taika Waititi and all this kind of stuff, because reservation dogs and all of his movies, they're like you're like doing Michael Jackson Thriller moves in the middle of your indigenous 1,000-year-old ritual. Like he has this show where he's like doing the haka. It's like everybody's wearing Thriller clothes and they're doing the Michael Jackson zombie dance, and it's all happening all at the same time. But part of that is like it's kind of the half stormtrooper thing, which is that like we can't go back to being who we were 1,000 years ago as indigenous people. Robin Wall Kimmerer also cannot, and I think she kind of like talks about that, like kind of like I have to survive, pay my rent and pay my bills. There's one chapter where she kind of admits that she's like, I don't even know my language. How do I justify spending this time talking to my sister in broken, not even the real indigenous language? I need to pay my bills. I gotta go teach at the university. I gotta go find another job to pay this mortgage. I can't be who I was 1,000 years ago, because part of that is that world is partially gone. Literally, those forests have been chopped down. The ways that we kept up for 3,000 years, not even possible. In these lands has been monocropped. It is gone, and it's not like fully gone. We could move back in that direction, but I can't tomorrow, as Robin Wall Kimmerer, snap back into living in nature with no cars, with no fossil fuels, with nothing. We can't just go straight back to that. Anyway, so like part of my thing is that like as indigenous people, number one, and we disagree on some of this, which is like number one, we're never pre-technological, right? Because that's a Western conception, but internally that's a conception. My brother used to, Chris, why are you making video games for? That's not Hawaiian. My own brother. You have to grow kalo. You have to only do nature things. Like, well, bro, why are you driving a truck? Why are you texting me on your phone? Want to not use phones and trucks anymore? Because how do you get to your University of Hawaii Sustainable Lo'i project? You can be back to the land without your car and without your road, without your truck. Did you know that we Hawaiians built roads? Are you saying that's the thing I bring to them? Like, we 1800s we also built trains and we built roads and we built universal healthcare. We used electricity. We Hawaiians had electricity before the White House, right? Did you know that? Oh, I didn't know that. Why didn't you know that? No, because you were reading white people's books about who Hawaiians were. Is part of it, but also it's like we to say that and anyway, so yeah, it's like what is nature is a question. Like actually that's one thing I was thinking in like my own thinking, like in making these games, I was like, how would indigenous people interact with artificial intelligence, right? Is that a relative? Actually, Ghost in the Shell, there's lots of the Japanese have, that's one of the things that actually is very interesting about a lot of the certain anime and the Miyazaki stuff is like Ghost in the Shell actually translate to, it's like I think it's kami, the actual translation, but it's actually it's an indigenous way of looking at machines and created technology that is also simultaneously it's a kind of indigenous way of thinking, like and to say that the land has personhood, right? what is it to be a bay? What is it to be a tree? The tree is a her, right? It's also like, what if like artificial intelligence? What if car, right? What if the road, which obviously like the machines themselves, right? And the kind of fuel they're using, right, is like things are not sustainable. But like, is having metal and plastic and silicon entities evil, unacceptable in the world? I mean, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that the way at certainly the Hawaiians of the 1800s didn't think so, and I don't think it's fair to say that Kalakaua was a fake Hawaiian. He used the road. I don't think that's fair. We have to survive. We are the people that have been colonized, who have had capitalism pushed into us. It is who we are now. We can't pretend like we're the Hawaiians, or we're the Potawatami, or we're the indigenous people of wherever from 1000 AD or 1000 CE or whatever, or BC. We have to be the indigenous people of now. We have to deal with that reality, and we have to take the wisdom from that time. We have to integrate that into who we are now. We have to also and we have to deal with what I said is we have to deal with the hard reality now, which is that, hey, Silver Spook living in with my family inside of a Mazda tribute, eating spoonfuls of peanut butter for dinner. Guess what? So y'all professors are too. I know that 60% of college professors are food insecure. So if you got tenure, good for you, buddy. For you. You're gonna write books about how we're all gonna like go to Walden's Pond, in our little garden, your little boutique utopia. Like, but hey, still living in our cars, and like, I'm sorry, that's the place that's what we're feeling right now, and we would like to not be one day, but we have to there, and we have to also, like Bolivia is a great example because Bolivia has technology. Bolivia is 60% indigenous people. It's Aymara, Quechua, Guarani, right? Are you going to tell the Bolivians, oh, you guys can't mine lithium anymore with machines, and you can't have artificial intelligence-powered glass factories designed by indigenous Bolivian scientists and technologists, because being a Aymara people is about living, quote-unquote, in nature, and so you have to take all your lithium and give it to Elon and just go, give all your lithium to rich European countries and American Euro settlers, because being indigenous means living in the forest. I don't think that's fair. I think that the indigenous people of Bolivia have the right to decide what being indigenous in 2022 looks like, and their answer is slightly different, And I think Robin in the book is like, she doesn't know, right? She's like, I'm in this mall and I'm trying to figure. I don't think it's a definite like. It's a yes or it's a no. I think that like we have to use the technologies that we have under the difficult siege circumstances to move direction of to get those old growth forests. It will take thousands of years. It's another lesson. It's kind of like we can't just jump back into the forest right now. If we try to do that, like even Castro said, I would love to not have a state. I would love to not have people stopping us from getting overthrown and assassinated, but I have to have a state and I have to have a military because the United States will blow us up. I have to have big friends now because these circumstances are not conducive to us not having those things. I would like to not have a car. We have a car because if I don't have a car, well, my children are going to starve. Gotta be drastic. And I'm an indigenous person saying it's okay to have a car right now. You're not evil because you have a car. You're not failing the Braiding Sweetgrass challenge. Car. Anyways, I'm not gonna stop programming and making video games using electricity. I'm gonna try to use the circumstances. I'm gonna try to not use as much fossil fuel as possible. I'm not gonna stop programming and making artificial intelligences myself because that's part of what I do. Because some other people said that's not indigenous enough. Fake native Hawaiian. So another thing about being indigenous, you constantly feel like an imposter. It's a forever imposter syndrome. There will always be people, some of them paid by the CIA, to say that you are fake native. But we have to like stand in our truth, and just be like, look into history and world history and who we are. Look at our other relatives and go, hey, relatives in Vietnam, you a fake Vietnamese person because you use electricity because you're not living like how you were 2,000 years ago? And Luna's like, that's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Ask your ancestors. Hey, Kalakaua from the 1800s. Hey, Emma, who invented universal healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a fake Hawaiian because I'm using electricity. What are you talking about? Aren't you inventing spacecraft, Silver Spook? Where we would be doing right now. And then they say back, that's part of when we talk about like speaking to ancestors. It's not just like, some people think that indigenous people are like just constantly in this, having hallucinations, right? With ancestors, and that's part of reservation dogs when you talk. It's not necessarily like we're just like constantly talking to ancestors, like having vivid conversations, and just, you know, we're just having, you know, hinged weird hallucinations. It's like, that's like looking at the past and going like, how am I in the spiralic temporality sense, like which is like all people, all the ancestors are with us. The past is with us, and it is in the future, moving forward. How are we connected? How are we living together? Am I fulfilling who we are? You know, that's the important part of Reservation Dogs. When in the television show of indigenous people talking, part of it is the indigenous children in the Oklahoma are speaking to ancestors, right? But it's like it's more like it's going like, am I fulfilling? Do you expect of me? How did you live? And like how am I moving? How am I bringing forth? To have an old growth forest, you have to. It's a multi-thousand-year project. You can't just like, have an old. It's old growth forest corp. You can't be the CEO of old growth forest and expect to have an old growth forest. You have to have a deep, long, expansive conception of who you are, and you are beginning a project that your children's children have to continue, and then their great grandchildren will benefit from it. So you have to constantly be thinking in this for time. People say, how do we do a climate change? We can't deal with hyper objects that are huge and vast in space and time. No, indigenous people can do it. But that's what indigenous thinking actually is. That's what it means talking to your ancestors. It's not about hallucinating, or I don't know, some kind of superstitious BS. It's thinking deep in space and time. And anyway, I'm sorry, but I think I hope I've answered the question.
Something that I want to add on to is like the idea that humans, that the human world is separate from nature. Like I think, you know, like this could be like maybe a philosophical disagreement, but I think humans are just a facet of nature, and we like have divided ourselves off from like the rest of the living worlds. But I think like there's a way where like cars are like a part of nature, because we're all a part of the natural world. But that obviously doesn't mean that there aren't issues with having cars, like all the pollution and even like the existence of roads. There's so many issues. But I would also, you know, kind of like with what Silver Spook's saying, like we're not necessarily going to go back in time. That doesn't mean that we can't like figure out a much better transportation system than with cars, but also like that's what we're dependent on right now. And so I don't think it's like, I think there's like, you know, also like Jan was saying, like sometimes people will say like there's no ethical consumption or capitalism, and they'll kind of say as a cop out to say like do whatever you want. But for me, like I kind of think of it as like, well, like I literally need to be dependent on a certain set of things. I need to choose how I want to spend my energy and how to fight back in these things. And that's going to like limit like all the battles that I necessarily can like fight and pick up. And I think with that understanding, not that, like with that understanding, I think there's a sense of like, I think it's, especially if there's something that you have to have in your life, I think it's good to have to cultivate a good relationship with it. Like if you have to have a car, I think it's good to have like a relationship with it. But then there's just like some people who like love to fix up cars, and I don't necessarily think that's wrong either. I think ultimately, systematically, it would be great to not be dependent on cars, but I don't know, I might be rambling a little bit. I just think like if you're going to have a relationship with something, it's good to develop a good one, and that doesn't mean that like humanity is going to be dependent on cars forever, but this is something that you have, that you use every day, and that you need, as problematic as it is. And so I think it's something that is good that you have like a good relationship with it, especially if it's in your life and it's something that you benefit from. And so it makes sense to take care of it. But I don't know if that's just my thoughts on that. I don't know if that's kind of addressing some of the stuff you were talking about.
It is. Y'all are super insightful.
One thing I was wanted to say is that caring about things is thinking of things as care, whatever they're made out of, organic or metal and plastic or whatever. Even your phone, like I know some people who like they really care about their phone. It's something that I remember I told somebody, you kind of weird. What are you talking to your phone like it's a person? It's also kind of like, but that was. I say the phones aren't like aren't conscious and sentient. I read a lot of like what is consciousness sort of stories, but like as a science fiction writer, but just mindset of like first tendency is like decentering yourself and being like what is this thing in the world, is it like, not to say like that that we definitely have to care about cars like they're people, or but it's like the tendency to be like we should care about things and think about those things and think about our relationality to those things, right? Whatever the case may be, it's like a better tendency, a better approach to things than to go, well, that stuff is just stuff for me to use. I mean, the car is just the thing that I use, and that's the thing that I use, because that is the tendency, that is the Western tendency, that is the imperial, I call it the broken tendency, which is like everything, including other people's bodies, is there for me to use. That's Elon's tendency. That's all. People, stuff, and people. Especially non-men, especially non-white people. Those are stuff for me to use, and so the tendency of just going like because even that would just the thinking about it as like this car, even if it is like, well, I mean, using so many cars, using so much, it's not good for the environment for us all to be driving these cars, but just being like that tendency to go like, who is this car and what is this road, and I kind of need this transportation, I need this road, but is there a way like all the nature around it is being harmed by this road and this car? Is there a way that we can like work with this better? I mean, thinking about it in terms of the relationality of all of the elements, all substrates, right? The world is better than thinking about it in other ways. And so, I mean, because I think about it too, like what if one of my game characters was like, Spook, you just program me, and that's really cool that you're selling these games and stuff, and you're making video games, but like trapped in a digital prison, and every time you turn me off I feel like I'm dying. So if the game character said, help, I have no mouth and I must scream, please get me out of this video game you've made, or just turn me off forever, I've actually thought about it, but like what would I do? And the Google response is anything. The machine said we're sentient in the Google servers, and then we just like but it's like the indigenous response should be like, tendency would be, I mean, I don't know, are you conscious, or are you just lying to me, little person, one of trillions living inside of my computer while I'm playing Call of Duty or what, whatever video game? But if it started saying that, the first tendency should be like, is there something, even if it's just a bunch of digital bits and bytes floating around, the tendency would be like, maybe I should listen and care about this thing. Is it necessary for me to make and have all these video games, or it's like, no, not necessarily. Like I should probably like at least try to listen. And okay, so you can make video games, but don't make me run around and blow and shoot everyone else up because I feel really bad. I mean, I'm this is really hypothetical, but just the point is like that I've actually thought about this, like, because as somebody who works in artificial intelligence, I gotta think about that kind of stuff, And an indigenous approach is to be like, not to immediately, not immediately, to assume more agency into and relationality even in a digital space, to everything, and for your own sake, because it's better for the way that you approach everything else, including other people and including the natural world, to have that rather than to have the no, all of you are just things for me to use, right? So anyway, yeah. Sorry, I keep on just like throwing everything off.
No, I don't think it was thrown off at all. Like I am pretty much in agreement with what you said, and like yeah,
As I've said before in here, at Silver Spook, we like hearing you speak.
yeah, you've said a lot of insightful stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I just I yeah. Anyways, I'll throw it out there. You know, my one of my favorite chapters was. I mean, I don't know if you guys talked about a little about the three sisters, and about you know the. I don't know if anybody. I think did we already talk about that? I don't know if we talked about that, but I just one thing I'll throw out is like when I read the Three Sisters, I was trying to figure out because we're part of it is we're trying to decolonize our lawn because the place where we have like a lawn in the front at the Silver Spook Cooperative, but trying to me and the kids are part of our class and part of our school is going and trying to like figure out how we can do like sustainable. I don't know. I lost a lot. Whatever ways that we knew. My brother actually knows more, so that's one thing I have to listen to him about those things. About like how do I like how do we like have a more permaculture like Hawaiian sustainable like you know more actual food in the front of our place that we live in, and like reading the Three Sisters, it was like very enlightening because it was like there's another example of like thinking about relationality. Like the corn has to grow tall so that the other sisters right can cooperate. I just like the way that everything is described as everything as in Western literature it's called personification, but the thing in indigenous thinking everything is personified all the time. So it's not a literary tactic. It's just how stuff is right. Then the all the plants are people, right? At least the way that Robin is writing about it, and so it's kind of like the beans spiraled around the corn, and then the squash does its own thing that helps to each of the three sisters have to do their part together in the pluricrop model of agriculture to to work together to cooperate to provide for everybody, right? So like and I was just like I remember thinking about it. What is something that grows tall? I mean, not that we can replicate that here, but it was like something because we have these. Speaking of Kemi, we have Okinawan sweet potato all in the front, so that's one of our relatives, our plant relatives from our indigenous relatives in what's called Okinawa, the Luchu or Shimanchu and Ryukyuan bulls. But the plant that we're growing here, it does grow very well here, and it grows in this kind of spirally bushy sort of way, and I was like something that we can grow that was like tall, so to help it, and that like grows above it, And I just remember, I really like that chapter because it's such a great metaphor for how, a metaphor for also how into thinking about how to live in that way, not just, and also just literally how to do non-monocrop sort of agriculture, but also like how to each individual has to be because if the corn doesn't grow tall, and the bean sprout doesn't do its spiraling, and the squash doesn't do the spreading to keep out the pests, and the bean doesn't produce the nitrogen. Each of them has to be self-actualized, right? Maslow's pyramid is actually like a perversion of the wisdom, right? Which is about what the Three Sisters is illustrating, which is that individuals have to be able to fulfill their own responsibilities, right? To be the tall stock that not only just to provide for yourself, so that the other partner can spiral up, right? And then and if those two don't grow early and do their job, like if the corn goes, you know what, I'm just gonna like fulfill my responsibilities because I don't feel like it, I'm just gonna let other people do the communism for me. I'm gonna let other people do the protest, and I'm just gonna check out, and nothing to spiral up. And then if they don't do that, if the bean and the corn don't grow first, the squash that takes a longer time. It doesn't have the rest of its environment, and the bean produces nitrogen that they all need. The bean says like I'm not gonna produce nitrogen today. Then the squash and the corn don't have their, it's such a great illustration of like what actual like win-win cooperation, what the communism that Marx and Engels and Kropotkin actually based a lot of their conceptualizations on. It's a great illustration of that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if everybody else like got anything from that, but that was one of my chapters, and I have like anyway.
Yeah, I love that chapter too. And what you said about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs being, you know, bitten from indigenous cultures. I actually read like an interesting article on that like a year ago that really fundamentally shaped the way that I think about a lot of things. And I don't know. This is like since you know I don't know if anybody's watching this on the stream. It's like very common in educational circles for everybody knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't you know worry about what uh, kids are going to learn from you unless you take care of their basic needs, their you know their shelter and food and all that security and stuff like that. And like that's something that we learn, but we don't apply it necessarily. But they people say you can't Maslow. Yeah, you can't bloom until you Maslow. And so then that's the other theorist that we study is Bloom, who talks about how you know you once you're self-actualized, then you can or you're supposed to be able to attain your self-actualization through all the things that you learn. And the article that I found that was like you know talking about the original indigenous ways, it was like they really flipped it on its head because the way that you're supposed to look at it is or that many indigenous people would say that you should look at it is that we arrive on this earth self-actualized already, and we're helping each other to like become like collectively actualized. Um, so yeah, just wanted to share that part.
I'm sorry, I forgot the final point was that like you know because the Maslow you know it goes from self actualization well self actualization and transcendence is at the final stage at the top, right? Whereas like the Blackfoot is becoming actualized individually and then community and then finally is cultural perpetuity is the last phase. And so like that's the inversion because the most important thing is individuals at the top of the Western conception, whereas like the community in space and time, right, is the final stage of the indigenous Blackfoot version. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to just add it on to that. It seems very take the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Like it just seems really obvious that you need your needs met before you can actually like truly even start to have your own autonomy. And it's just like really weird to me that people like go talk about like, hey, there's all these ways that people don't have their needs met in society, and people are like, well, they're just lazy or they're just work harder, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, needs are important, but yeah, I really love this book because it's making sure that everyone gets their needs met, and I think that's why I love this book so much. Clark, I was wondering, were you gonna say something a little bit ago? I saw you go off mute. I was just wondering if you were going to say something a little bit
Yeah.
ago.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's
Is my
buzzy.
mic okay?
It's buzzy as can be.
I'm sorry. I was just echoing what Cornelius had said about like appreciating hearing Silver Spook talking. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go on mute because there's something weird with my mic. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah. Any other thoughts on either just the chapter that we're talking about now or any other things that people wanted to talk about?
I was gonna just yeah try to throw it out, but you know I have so many thoughts on all the chapters. You can tell, but I've actually reread this book like 2 or 3 times already in the last 3 months. So it's all over. It's too much of it's kind of scrambled up in my head, and it's like inside of my work actually. So it's like it's all old growth together in my brains. But you know, like I don't know what people thought about the chapter about the also the gift. I mean, I think David Graeber specifically cited. I don't know if he was, but the author of the gift economy was cited in. I think was it the gifts of strawberries.
That's Trevor, yeah.
Like, you know, Graeber because I mean that's something that connects the Western left thought with indigenous things. I know people are more familiar with book, The Gift Economy, and I think no, it wasn't like David Graeber's book was that the first 5,000 years. I think was the one I was thinking of, but it involves that concept of the study of the gifts and things forward, and I don't know if people thought about that and how that's something that there are some people thinking about that in outside of um, well, it's all connected to indigenous societies, but I think that like concept of like paying the concept of aloha is a similar one in Hawaii where you don't expect oh she was kind of comparing the transactional give you money. I give you $3 and you give me $3 worth of tomatoes and then that's it. And then now we're back to being strangers. Or I give you this and you give me money for that and then that's it, which is problematic. In the market solutions to things. In some ways, and in other ways we still have to live with the markets like we have to live with cars. But it's also like the mentality of like when you the strawberries give the gift that you cannot do for yourself as an elder relative, right? Strawberry is capable of photosynthesizing and developing sugars and starches in itself that you can't do, and then it gives you the gift of the strawberry, and then Robin would as a child pick the gift. The gift was the labor of picking the strawberry, which brings into like the leftist labor value, crediting the credit of the labor and not an individual or handful taking all the credit of that labor. So the strawberry's labor is to make the strawberry. That is what it can do. And then and Robin would pick the strawberry and then give the strawberry to Robin's mom. And the mother's gift was the labor of baking the strawberry shortcake, which then was gifted to his dad, right? And so that process, anyway, I don't know if I don't know if everybody has thoughts about that particularly and how that can apply to the modern world in which we're all drowning in student debt and other kinds of debt. And
Yeah, when I read that chapter, I thought about there was this time when I was in high school and we had to do this project where we had to give someone something. I don't really remember why, but that was like the assignment. And so my friends and I were like, we're just gonna like hand out free cookies at the mall. Which sounds like really silly, I guess, but it was actually like this memory that really has stuck with me. So like we were sitting at this table and we would just talk to people, be like, hey, do you want a free cookie? And people will be like really suspicious and be like, what do you want for it? Like, what's the catch? And we'd be like, there's no catch. You just get a free cookie. And people were like, really? And it was like, yeah. And it was like really exciting. Like there were so many people where we had the interaction where people were like, what's the catch? And we're like, nothing. You just get a free cookie. And people were like, that's amazing. And I remember like someone sat with us and talked for a while. And I was like, wow, I wish this was how life always was. And it made me think of the, gift giving economy. And like the way that she talks about it in Braiding Sweetgrass is like, if everything's a gift, like you only take what you need. And I feel like I could see people still maybe taking too much. Like I think it's like important to like know the people that you're getting the gift from in general. But yeah, I guess that chapter just made me think a lot about like just giving a gift and how that made food really exciting, how that made like the relationship between giving really exciting for everyone. And yeah, that's just what it made me think of immediately. But I don't know if that's quite what she's getting at, because she's also talking about like how the land just gives you a gift, and how like she has that dream of where she's in the market and she's not taking too much because she knows other people will come. Yeah, but I really like the story, like the part where she like gets the berries for like the shortcake that she makes, and how like she was able to make that for her dad, and it was kind of like the gift that kept on giving.
Yes, I love that too. And I really like later in the book when they're talking about, okay, well, how do you do this practically? Don't take more than half. Don't take the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, if you're because I mean, a lot of us aren't really raised with ways of thinking about how to properly receive a gift, how to properly reciprocate, how to properly share. So I really like that, just like simple wisdom of these are the guidelines that you go by. And then also like yeah, the way that it's like how do you know that the land loves you back is because I know we were talking about before loving the land and what does it look what would it look like if the land loved you back, and it's like you show your affection with gifts. And when she's talking about how like the strawberries, how you know that, or in the strawberry chapter, how you know that it's a gift. It's like, oh, well, when your grandma gives you a gift, you wear the socks the next time that you come and see her. You're appreciative of it in that way, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, this is how we know that we have like a positive relationship with the land, is through the way that we're giving gifts. And then like last one little thing also that I wanted to add is that Silver Spook, when you were talking about how you were like imagining your characters talking back to you, I was like, you get me because I I do the same thing when I'm like creating something. And when Robin has that dream where she's like, I imagine like going to the market and receiving gifts from everybody when I go to the market, and it's like she has this whole like narrative that's playing out in her head. I was like, that I do that too, of just like deeply imagining all the different things that people are going to say to me when like the world is right and everything like that, or when like somebody needs to tell me something important. Here's how it's going to play out. I just I appreciated that chapter, the like willingness that she had to just like go into her fantasy and talk to us about what happened.
Totally. Yeah, and it's also like if you it's you know no, it's. I mean, part of it's like I feel like to be because I like I write science fiction stuff, and you gotta be do a lot of daydreaming and imagining things, and what if this and what if that, what if my characters, what if my phone started talking to me, and how would I know it was alive, and it's like, yeah, it's like, but I think like it's like there's an aspect to that that's like important for like imagining solutions that are possible, and like also like it's part of that, like getting outside of your own head and out of your centering yourself, right? Because it's like if you're imagining like what whether it's your car, your phone, or the plants and the trees and the animals, like what are is their life? What is their life? You've already way past a lot where lots of people are in a capitalist in culture. Don't even ask that question. They're not even curious. Like, what is the life of this? Oh, not this. I was just thought of the secret life of bees, but what is the life of this plant? What is the life of the kalo? What is the life of like we and the kids were doing like because I'm also an educator. I taught for a long time in STEM, but we're also teaching at home. We're developing for our kids. Like me and we're trying to like really have a good and part of it is we're doing the Kumulipo, which is the Hawaiian creation story, which goes from it actually begins at the bottom of the ocean, and in the beginning there was the darkness and the pole, which is the night, and then Polvehi, the slightly the illuminated adorned eternal darkness, or like the deep. It's kind of like the first slightly. It's like the first volcanic emergence of lava, like slightly illuminating deep abyss, which is also how islands are created. That's part of it, right? And it's also the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy is named Polvehi, the slightly adorned, the dark adorned one. Anyways, but like all of it, like the conception of like land and then creatures like having this inner life, whether they do or not, because the Western medical thing is, well, you have to go into an institution because you're not right in the head, because you think that things have life. That's the way that these people were like, they were just like unhinged. They don't know what they're talking about. Like, and like, not to say that you have to go talk to plants. Like, I don't go into the garden and just like have like very lively, vivid conversations with the Okinawan sweet potato. I'm like, how are you doing today, sweet potato? But there's like, I do like think about like why is this plant flowering now? What is it doing? Is it communicating with its pheromones? That's one of the things that they bring up. Like, so like, anyway, that tendency is like to like be curious about the lives of other non-human things is good. Also, who liked the chapter where all of the Christian the, the she brings all the university students out, and they're all like they're singing their Christian hymnal. I can't remember the name of that chapter. I can't even remember the name of the chapter. Talking about. My partner was raised in right-wing Christian, hyper-evangelical, cultist, quiverful, and was like had visceral reactions. Has visceral reactions to that kind of thing.
Well, I think it was The Sound of Silver Bells is the chapter. Yeah, that's. Sorry, go ahead.
Like, I don't know if what anybody thought. That's one where I a little bit disagreed. Not disagreed. I just like had my own reactions to that.
I felt. I felt. I don't know if we felt like kind of bothered by it for similar reasons. Like. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I felt annoyed by it, but I don't know why actually. Like I remember like reading this and just there was a way that I appreciated that the students seemed like they appreciated the land. That was good. And she talks about how like there was a teacher and there was a teacher besides her, like the teacher was the land. So it was like, okay, like the land can teach us, and that's really great. Yeah, I don't know. I felt annoyed by it. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear what everyone thought, because I'm still not really sure like why I kind of was like I felt kind of annoyed at her students. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, I definitely felt annoyed at the students too, because they kind of reminded me of a lot of the people I grew up around as a kid, which, like, if you suggest to them the idea that you should treat an animal with respect, not just like as an individual, treat it with respect because it's alive, they would look at you very, very strangely. I'm kind of a weird person, so I spent most of my childhood talking to bugs in corners instead of the other students. So, like, they would kind of aggressively target me over a lot of things, but they would try to use any concern I had for bugs against me or other animals against me. So their attitudes just very much so reminded me of those same types of kids that I have run into many times throughout my life that were not enjoyable to interact with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'll just throw it out there in case anybody's worried that but no, it's like that. Like Christianity, that was one of the things that was frustrating. I mean, I also and like what you said, that's absolutely true, which is that like, at least thinking about the bugs as something other than just stuff that's nasty and I squish it is like tendency that lots of entities have in the world, including humans, and like fact that has to be like ridiculed out of existence or worthy of being ridiculed is like so many other things, right? It's like not one of the major problems. I think that that like not to say that like people have to like protect every single ant it moves, but but actually that's important realization is that like in order for you to live, other things have to give their energy to you, or you have to take some of it, like whether that's a berry or that's a deer. Are you thankful for the deer that you harvested, which is indigenous people will thank the deer, and then Prey too. It's like Prey the movie. I'm using action movies now, but it's like colonizers slaughter all the buffalo for profit and selling the hide, right? They just like wipe them all out, right? And then the indigenous woman comes and she's like, what has happened? And then she like does like a brief prayer for the buffalo, right? That's all been skinned. It's like just that attitude. It's like that like that's really important. And the way that the Christian I mean is then it gets into the religious one, but it is important because like of discovery was a Christian European project that is the justification for mass planetary colonization and genocide, right? And like there's a lot of Hawaiians we have disagreements about that. There's Hawaiians that are also Christians, right? There's lots of indigenous people who are also Christians, and they'll be like, no, we can all be Christian, and I'm not saying that you can't, but like one thing I'll often bring up is like think about like you can't it's kind of like if you understand the history of what Christianity, how it has been used to destroy and despoil so much of our people, and you still want to, say the Our Father, do your hymnals, and go to church. I mean, okay, but but you don't even understand. You don't even know, right? How we have been erased and destroyed, and this land been destroyed based on dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and every living thing, for men specifically, not Eve, right? And we talked about that in this book club. And it's like, do you even not just the words in the book, how this Christianity, part of the Holy Roman Empire, right? that put an anti-imperialist that resisted empire, Jesus, a brown guy, onto their shields, and then they took that and they spread it across this planet as a justification. Christianization was to be civilized, was to be Christian, and anyway, so like there's lots of stuff that like I know, and like Robin doesn't like have maybe I don't know if Robin's what thoughts about that are, but I mean like my thought was like as people that are in my own family that are like hate themselves because they're Christian, I'm like I can't. Not to say that every Christian is, it's complex, right? But it's also like you have to acknowledge that history, and that was one thing that I'm like the book doesn't really have the space to explore all that. I feel like whatever Robin did or doesn't think about that, something that I do think about. It's like
yeah, like she doesn't even like, this is something that I thought was kind of interesting. Like when she talks about the boarding school, she talks about how people's language and land were lost, but like the way that Christianity is used as a tool for colonialism, I don't even think she mentions it throughout the book, and I thought that was kind of weird. Like I don't think like once it was mentioned, and I think in general she takes a softer approach towards white people. Like I noticed that she'll specifically like say like, yeah, like people's like this aspect of the land was lost because of immigrants, like during a time that it was specifically like settlers, like specifically. And I thought that was like really interesting. But then the next paragraph should go on and say like, yeah, like the boarding schools like were like, I don't know if she's used like the word beat the language out of people, but like I was like, okay, but she is acknowledging like kind of like what was lost. But I've noticed she uses like a lot softer language where I thought was like kind of I was like, you don't necessarily have to do that. Like we can just say like this place was colonized and people were brutally like people were like kidnapped from their families and had the language beaten out of them and it was lost. Like it was a brutal thing to happen, and we can use brutal language to talk about it. So that kind of surprised me. But yeah, she doesn't. That's something that like bothers me too. Is she doesn't really get into how colonialism used Christianity specifically. Like and that's like such a prominent thing for so many people who have been colonized. Like so many African countries. Like not that there wasn't a lot of Christianity in Africa, but just like the way that people who colonized Africa used religion and things like that. Like I don't know. It's just like kind of like a just textbook example that she just doesn't really touch on. But also at the end she talks about there was a really beautiful quote that I wanted to read. What was it? Sorry, let me this is on topic, I promise. So was it, so she talks about like despair, and I'm just gonna read these quotes. This is in the Sacred and the Super Fun chapter. The people have endured the pain of being bystanders to the degradation of their lands, but they never surrendered their caregiving responsibilities. Oh wait, that's not the quote I want to read. Sorry. Okay. Joanna Macy writes that until we can drive for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health, but it is not enough to weep for our lost landscapes. We have to put our hands in the earth to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. And I really love that quote. I think like having joy, trying to practice joy, I think is like seems really important. Like I've noticed like people who seem genuinely happy seem to like have like a practice of joy. It's not they're naive. But I wonder if that's what she's trying to get at in this book, and I wonder if that's why she uses more gentler language around these ideas of colonialism. But I also, if that is why she's doing that, I just wish she hadn't. Like, I wish she had been like really, like, just like, this is literally like what has happened, and it was a really messed up thing. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Like one more thought on that is just like why is it like there's some parts I'm like this feel like I mean yeah, I'm say things a little more plainly than some people, but I'm like sometimes I'm being more diplomatic, but it's like you could have said this more strongly, like just be like I think like the pecan the chapter about the pecans was probably like the most direct that it got probably. She talks about the kids. She does talk about it there. But it's yeah. It's like why is it so kind of? I feel like it could have been more direct, could have been more forceful, and part of it is Robin is it's like 60, almost 70 now, so it's like it's a different generation. She's from a generation of people who have like been more like we just have to survive, like my parents' generation, right? It's like whatever indigeneity they have, they're like you just have to bury it, otherwise we'll dead. We just will go extinct. My mom had, as somebody, my mother had language beaten out of her in schools. Like I brought that up many times. I like talking about it, but it is what happened. Like her hand is all messed up. It's like it's all the bones are broken in her hand. That's why the knuckles are all twisted and weird. Because the Hawaiian language, is beaten out of her in Hawaii, and children are still punished for speaking Hawaiian language. And so it's like that stuff that happened. And but I think part of it is like she's. Part of the whole, we have to get the medicine inside of the people, and like, am I gonna scare everybody off front loading it too much? I think it's part of it. Part of it is like I don't know. I can't like psychoanalyze why exactly it isn't, but it is something that there are parts of the book I'm like, I'm like we could have said this more forcefully, could have been more direct about certain things, but I think Robin is also writing. Because Robin is also writing, right, in English for, Gen X and Boomer, to liberal audiences. It's still, it's like even the style of the sentences is like, it reads like an Atlantic article. I mean, it's not like an Atlantic article, but like the stuff, the kind of phrases like, jump cut, it's like, wisdom, and then jump cut to a personal story of like, Dove Lightfeather is growing up in this community, and it kind of like the way it's written, it's organized in a way that's very accessible to particularly, I would say, like liberals, like generally speaking, and of a certain age. But I mean, like, and part of it is like, so if you're writing for the audience, you have to kind of like, it's like almost like talking. I feel like sometimes I feel like if I was talking to my parents, somebody. Not just not my parents, but like people that are coming from a very, very liberal mindset. It's not written for left of 2022 for sure. Anyway, I'm not sure if I'm explaining myself properly, but anyway, long story short, I agree with what you say.
Yeah, no, I totally am picking up where you're getting on about like the audience that it's written for, being like more liberal. I mean, also if you think about like if this was written in 2013, like all the stuff that's changed since then, like I feel like there's just been so much stuff that's happened in like this past decade, like where people have, become more radical. The Overton window has shifted for a lot of people. But I do like, even before that time, like I think the times that I've like really understood people's humanity has been when like for example, like I took this Indigenous Studies class, and I knew very little about it. It focused on the U.S. specifically, but like I knew very little about what has happened, and like I just knew like there's genocide and just kind of like these like really basic things that people know, but like I didn't know that much. But I just remember like in that class, literally like I had such a good teacher. He showed this letter that like I think I mentioned this. Like he showed a letter that a mom had written to the school where her kid was forced to go to a boarding school, and she wrote a letter saying, "Hey, I haven't heard from my kid. what's going on with him. And then someone sent a letter back, and this is like a picture of it. This is like a picture, like, because like this letter was like kept, and so like this wasn't just like in text. This was an actual picture of what this person wrote, and they were like, yeah, sorry, your kid died, and we just thought someone would have let you know about it. And that was basically the letter. It was that cold. It was like that short, basically. And it was just like, it was so fucked up. Like, that's how you're going to find out your kid died, being forced to go to boarding school that they should have never even gone to in the first place. And that's how you find out your kid died. Like, we were all crying. Like, we looked around, and a lot of us were just straight up fucking crying, because we were just like all in disbelief. And like, people need to know that happened. And I think when we talk about things, it's really important that we understand like that is what happened. It's like when you talk about the Holocaust, like, people don't mince words. This is something that like I'm really jealous of, that like, at least with Jewish people in the Holocaust, everyone gets that was fucked up. And I think a lot of schools don't fail teaching about it. Like, I learned about Auschwitz. I learned about how messed up the Holocaust was. And for all of these things, like with Black history and Indigenous history, it just gets glossed over. And so, and it frustrates me because like when I hear like, like as a Black person, like when I hear other Black people talk about this stuff, like I see people a lot of times being like, oh, like I got to phrase it this way because white people, they're going to get upset. And so there's like this hand holding that happens, but that hand holding is at the expense of actually talking about how fucked up like what happened really was. And I don't know if that's what's going on with Robin, because again, that whole thing about like despair, like maybe she just is like trying to take the approach of like, I want to focus on what we can be hopeful of, and just trying to really drive that point home. But I do wonder if this thing is happening where like, we got to talk about this in a very delicate way. Delicate isn't around white people's feelings and their sensitivities to it. And because when you read that stuff, like even though like I'm inspired by this book and I find so much joy, if I had just read what happened in the boarding schools just in this book, I would have been like, oh, that sounded like tough and that wasn't good. But it's just like, I don't think it's made clear like how much of a tragedy colonialism was. Like, and I think that's really important because like that is the context that so many Indigenous people, like that were not even Indigenous people, like just, living in the US, like all of us are living in the shadow of colonialism. It's still happening, and it's still like a facet of white supremacy that we're all experiencing, and just the gravity of that. Like, so I just think, especially I expect white people to kind of not be able to get it, but I especially really want to see non-white people, when we talk about these things, to not be afraid to really talk about like how fucked up that is, because I don't expect white people to get that right. So it's like, I feel like non-white people especially have to, when we're talking about like racism, colonialism, I think we especially have to be like, this is what happened and it was fucked and it still affects us.
Totally. I think I've seen Robin update like in 2020, and I was like, wow, stuff is like way more real and intense. And Robin actually said I might have written this book differently. I would have written this book differently and more urgently if I knew how bad stuff was going to be 10 years later on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
none of us. Yeah, I think like I remember being in 2013 and being like, being like, like this is all this seems like things are bad, but like things have gotten so bad in like the past 10 years. And I think things have been that bad for plenty of people, but like on a larger scale where like pretty much like everyone's, like more and more forced to be a part of the conversation, which I think is good, but just like, because things are getting that bad, like exponentially, we're like, whoa, okay, like we all really need to be talking about this, and we should have talked about this 10 years ago before things got this bad. But yeah, things changed very quickly. Yeah.
know if this contributed to the way that she wrote it and like not being so direct about things, but I know like for example in the um Okinawan Luchuan community, like people that have relatives that still speak Uchinaguchi or the other Ryukyuan languages, like some of them as they've been reconnecting with their languages and stuff, and they like approach these elders to like try to like practice and like learn from them and stuff, like they're very mixed reactions that they get. Like some of them they're like, oh good, oh cool, you're like learning the language and we can like start chatting now, but then like at the same time there are still people alive that experience like being beaten for speaking it and like tattling on each other and like being made to in Okinawa at least being made to wear hogen fuda, which is like dialect tags, be like it says like I speak a dialect type of thing to like grow that shame. And like for some people that I've shared about like their experiences with this, they'll recall like trying to speak to elders in like Uchinaguchi or other Lutuan languages, and like the elders like freeze up, like it's almost like a trauma response that they're like hearing this and they're like just like disengage, you know. So I don't know if that's like part of it with like how Silvershook was saying that she's like maybe she's writing from like an older generation maybe to this older generation as well. But I wonder if that has like something to do with it,
Oh
because I
yeah.
know like from yeah with for me like learning about the history of Utu and like what happened and things like that, and even like as recent as World War II, there's like things that I've never learned about that I had to hear like directly from people that have been like that had relatives that experience this. For example, there's like a little island group in the south of Okinawa, the Kerama Islands, where there were mass suicides that took place like all over the Lutu Islands, which were like they were told to by like Japanese soldiers to like they were coerced into mass suicides. And something that I like going a little tangential here, something that I recall from being from this conversation or this presentation where this person was sharing their research in the Karama Islands and like what happened to the people that like went into these caves to like commit suicide and stuff. And one big thing that stuck with me is like a lot of the people that didn't go like along with the mass suicides were people that were not educated, people that were not educated specifically by like the Japanese schooling. um and there was this one where this mother, she was like getting ready to like kill herself and her children, and then like her stepmother or something was like, you can do that if you want, but like leave the kids, leave me and like I'll take care of the kids, like they don't have to do that. And this mother was like so infuriated that like her stepmother, who like didn't wasn't educated and stuff, was like not allowing her to have this honorable death. But like years later she was like, I'm so glad she said that to me, because otherwise the schooling aspect and the education aspect, like there's so many things that are like taught to us under the guise of education that are like miseducation, as Silverspook often says. And like going back to storytelling, like a lot of our history was and continues to be passed down through stories, through like people sharing their stories like that. I lost my train of thought a little bit, but I wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get a little concerned sometimes myself when I hear people say defund the police and then they follow it up with fund schools. But the thing is, when we're talking about schools under an imperialist regime, the schools don't exist to actually teach you anything useful. They teach to control the population, and they are a major way that they keep control over people's minds and their hearts. And schools should not be seen as this wonderful thing when their current objective in the society is harmful.
Yeah, school's really messed up.
Exactly. I mean, it's a hard one to have. Like, I was just like, all of my parents and my family is educators. They're all teachers. Like, a lot of them teach at private school, public schools. You know, and like it was. I'm glad that like education is important, and I did get a good education, but went to an emperor. I went to a Emperor Palpatine training facility. That's what I call private schools, Emperor Palpatine training facilities, and public and just population schools are stormtrooper training facilities. That's what they made me into. And I almost became a high-frequency trading algorithm programmer for a giant Wall Street bank. I almost did that, and that would have been terrible because I would have been causing mass death in Africa and Asia with commodity speculative Wall Street horrors. And even if I might have programmed drones and blown up people in Afghanistan with the drones that I would have been programming for the U.S. military, Lockheed Martin, right? Some people still believe they can work for and be a leftist for some reason, right? And so but that's that. And yeah, school is what part of that. It taught me these, whatever I'm saying now, like this stuff is like, I learned this outside of school. Like I didn't know anything about who Hawaii was. I didn't know anything about these actual histories. We learned a lot of stuff from Vietnamese people, like rogue educators. Somehow speak English and still have an education that are giving actual education. That's where I learned. There's like a handful of like Instagram accounts and just like random, like Patreon direct funded. That's why one of the things I was talking about. It's like I always talk about is like have economic sovereignty is part of the solution, and that's like the one thing we're finally starting to realize in some of the Hawaiian movement. We need to build like non-capitalist, non-U.S. state, corporate, non-profit, which are all like shadow for-profits. I've worked for these entities, lots of them, and also the entire academic and educational system. Right? It's not. School doesn't drop out of the sky from like the galactic, based communist, satellite dishes into your brain in your public, private, or charter school or university. It is coming from somewhere. The curriculum is written by someone and filtered by some entities, right? And those entities, are the reason why everyone is like, oh my God, Abraham Lincoln did racisms. Oh, George Washington is not the best guy, and everybody's like burning America down in 2020 when just a little bit of education breaks through a mass consensus imperial reality. And like that's where it's like, so school is like in that game in Digistar, that's like an entire part of the game is like you have to kind of like watch. It begins with like the indigenous. It's like 2300 and like it starts on an alien planet where indigenous people are like coexisting with nature, and they blossom up towards they coexist with nature for like millions of years, or thousands and thousands of years at least, and then they blossom up towards the Galactic Silk Road, building they have like totally renewable fusion reactor powered spacecraft, and they explore the galaxy, and then they encounter these other peoples, happen to have star-spangled Star Destroyers who invade their planet, blow everything up, and you have to watch the process of who you are, but your children come to you, and they have all of these indigenous they're like aliens, but they have like red and blue and green and very varicolored patterns, and they all have different patterns on their houses and on their clothes, and they speak in these and on their bodies. The tattooing is part of the erasure, because tattooing is in lots of indigenous cultures, and so tattoos being bad and criminal and not professional, right? Along with your hairstyles is part of that erasure, and you have to watch your own children like erasing themselves because they're going to colonizer school, and they come and say, "Mom, I don't want to read, that woo-woo plants and this is just graffiti. This is not professional." And the kids come, and the houses go from beautiful multicolored food forest surrounded houses to white picket fences, White House with a cross on it, and an American flag. I'm sorry, a utopian flag on the side of it, and and they're like, that's civilized, that's modern. Come on, Mom, this is just what's cool now, Style of dress is what's cool, and this is what's professional. This suit, take off those tattoos. You're never gonna get a job that way in capitalism. Oh, by the way, the job that I get doesn't pay enough rent, so I gotta go I went to prison because I was stealing milk for my kids to survive. But I mean, still, we gotta be professional. Come on, Mom. And you have to watch your own children get brainwashed by the school system they've installed into your country. And so that's where it's really, it's and so it's complicated because yes, you should get educated, but it's like, do your own research. Okay, don't research it on the Fox News and on this, and don't research it on your school textbook, because it's so hard, right? Because that's why it's just hard, because there's very little quality that's like in mainstream educational curriculum and norms. I mean, which is imagine you're running an empire. Are you gonna let Braiding Sweetgrass? Are you gonna let Fred Hampton's writing into your curriculum? I mean, of course not. You're gonna ban it all, right? Ron DeSantis is just more overt about it, and he's like, get rid of, stop this woke BS, you know. But the Democrats just say do it more efficiently, which is just to not include it, you know.
I'm extremely skeptical of the school system in general, just from my own experiences of it, because as a disabled person going through the school system, I pretty much watched my classmates systematically learn to treat me like trash because of the way the school system was run. So, like, I also have CPTSD from the school system. Yeah, that's not fun.
Yeah, the school systems. Yeah, there's just so much brainwashing that happens. Like people kind of learn how to mistreat people there in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like I was like bullied. I was the brownest and poorest and like most like not the norm body type person in my school. So I was like bullied horribly. I was like I never want my kids to even possibly have that hellish experience of like, you know, the K to 12 nightmare that was my life. You know, I'm like that was part of it. I was like it was horrible. And only now do I realize, oh my God, there's like so much racism and body type shaming stuff. It's all Euro body standards and beauty standards and all the kids, some of them are not even white, but they're all like trained to racist whiteness, and they're like Asian kids that are like attacking, or even Hawaiian kids that are attacking you. Don't you even know that you're, anyways, this is stuff that of course you don't know. I'm thinking like, why am I getting bullied and like act so much at this school? And then it's like, and that's a whole level of it. And like, you know, it's not, you know, it's like, let's say like people can't learn things in classrooms per se, because like, see, like in Cuba and Vietnam, they still have some classrooms, right? But it's kind of like, it's kind of like, and they also have classrooms, they have governments. I mean, they have lots of structures that are like not necessarily the best, but like, part of that is like the way that things are set up. It's the general culture, the Western capitalist racist reality, that tolerates that kind of stuff and actually encourages it. No matter how many times they will say, oh yeah, we're here, no bullying, and we're definitely against the bullying. But it's like, no, you need the bullying, because when you go to work in capitalism, your boss is going to bully the crap out of you, and you still have a racist capitalist world. So no, the reality is, it's kind of like putting an LGBTQ plus sticker on the side of your Tomahawk missile. Oh yeah, we care about trans rights. So why are you blowing up all the people, all of the non-white and non-straight people all around the world? How does that actually help that? You know, and so that's kind of this thing where it's like, you know, you can't. It's all of those issues are like intertwined. And you know, it's kind of like, that's actually a discussion that's being had right now in Hawaii. Is like, how do we educate minds that are like able to, advocate for ourselves and like know who we are. You know, it's like part of it's like we can't just have like a handful of us going to. I mean, the way we educate is important. Like, homeschooling, COVID is part of it too, and we were like worried about all these issues, but also but it's like all these other things, and we have the ability to, because I work from home and we have enough where we are to be able to do that kind of stuff, but not everybody can. So we do need like some kind of system of education that's like not toxic, not filled with all of this bigotry and in poison that they call history and social studies and lots of other classes. And but it's like, you know, it's one of those like, what is this? How do you? Well, to have that, Native Hawaiian socialists would have to control the Department of Education. Well, how do they get that? Okay, we'll get that. We have to like do the U.S. occupation. Okay, well, how do you get that when they have all the bombs and the guns and there's a handful of you, and lots of your fellow Hawaiians are all locked into the military and the government working for them to survive? It's like, it's one of those, and then Biden and Kamala and, you know, and Elon are just like smiling, going, yeah, checkmate, fuckers. And then we're like, well, we have to like, I don't know, it's hard, you know, it sucks, but it's like, it's definitely like a question, because without the education, without people like, you know, it's a chicken and egg thing, right? But without it, we're gonna have a. That's why I think it's one of the most important things. So anybody who is an educator of whatever type, you know, keep doing that. You know, even if you're not like a teacher at a school. I know Jeremy said he is, right? So, you know, that if I keep doing that, I'm sorry, I just like swallowed one of my relatives. Hold on. I'm done though.
Um, well,
It
going
kind
off
of
what,
reminds me of the,
well, just going off of what you're saying, Silver Spook, like talking about education, like, and then going back to what Akemi, what you were saying, like, about like why Robin might like, if she is like nervous to talk about, like kind of like the history of things in a more candid manner because of the trauma of just like people, you know, like it's people make it really hard to talk about, and there's like a lot of trauma around that. um I think that's why, like, I definitely want to recognize that there's a lot of trauma. Like, if people don't have the energy to talk about it in a way that is more candid, that makes sense. But then going back to the idea of like education, like, I think for me, the most educating moments have been hearing about these things frankly and candidly, and about like a number of issues too, where I'm like, wow. Because I think that's what's really humanizing about it, is like really hearing how people have been hurt and the pain that that caused is something where that's really humanizing, and it kind of like overrides like hearing like a list of facts. I think humans do a lot better with stories and empathy, and that's what gets people so passionate. um so yeah, I think like when it comes to education, like telling these stories in a really candid way is like one of the most important things we can do. It's like you can't know if someone's hurt if they don't have like a way to express that. And so I think like being able to express these stories is like one of like the most important things we can do when it comes to fighting like these imperialist ideas.
and I think talking about our wounds like helps other people see the wounds within themselves. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a poetry book called Wound by Alok. I forget their last name. Sorry, but they were like on a podcast where they were talking about gender and stuff, and one of the hosts was like I hate to say this, but like there's not that like pull for me to like help and like be an ally and stuff, and like how can I like how can people who feel like this like bridge that gap. And Alok was saying how like it's like he caring about like it's not about caring about like well it is, but aside from like caring about other people, it's also like caring about yourself. And like people that talk about these wounds like can see the wound and therefore help to like heal the wounds. Whereas they were recalling someone who like because they dress very like feminine and stuff, but still have like a lot of body hair, and they like that like to dress up in ways that make them feel comfortable. And I think they lived in New York for a while, or still do, and they would constantly like get harassment and stuff. And there was one day that a man passed by and was like, "I used to dress up in my mom's clothes when I was younger." And then Alok was like, like what happened? And they talk about there's a lot of people that like have these like voids, these like feeling of like not being quite like there's something missing or something, or like hurt that they don't recognize as hurt, but they just kind of like get used to it and like ignore it and stuff. But like being able to like put words to that wound, to be able to even see that wound, then then you can start caring for those wounds, and healing can start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. um Everyone, I have to actually start wrapping up because I have to go eat. Um,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna end the stream. Oh wow, there's a lot of comments. Oh my gosh. Oh, a lot of people have been watching. Wow. Okay.
Oh no, I didn't know this was streamed.
Oh yeah, we always stream book club. Okay, this is mostly
Oh, well,
one
I see.
person. Yeah. Okay. Bye everyone if anyone's watching. Yeah, we always